Hello, this is the Stories Beside channel. I release videos every day for you. Subscribe and click the bell.
Kevin picked up the ringing phone and frowned. It was Margaret, his daughter. Her calls hadn't boded well lately, but he hadn't expected this. "Daddy, I need your help right away. I accidentally hit a man." Her daughter's voice was breaking. She was out of breath, either from terror or something else. "Stop. Don't panic. Is he alive? Where are you?" After hearing Margaret's answer, he quickly packed up and went to help out and to sort out what had happened and to do everything in his power to save his wayward child and from criminal punishment and from further ruining her own life. What can you do? Only daughter, late child. They are often spoiled to the last degree. What else could it be? Long awaited, begged from God, begged child, whose birth was a miracle. How can you forbid him anything? How can you refuse? Especially if the parents are well-to-do. And what else do they work for? And in general live as not for their child. It's a miracle that if you hurt him, he'll disappear. Yes, she and Nancy waited 20 years for the birth of a child. That is, they didn't wait any longer. For the first 10 years of their marriage, they hoped. Nancy was treated, even decided to have some kind of operation, but it was all useless. Then they just waited, what if? And then they just accepted it. Well, there are childless couples. It's a shame, of course, but what can you do if it's not given? They loved each other. Besides, they both worked, loved their work. In those years, Kevin was able to open his own business, earn even more, but also spend more time at work. However, he always lived well. His parents were not the last ones either. Kevin, after their death, got a luxury apartment and money, and even a housekeeper. It was a distant relative of his parents, a girl a little younger than Kevin. A little, as they say, plain. She lived with her parents in the village, and after they died, this Doris could not live alone. Here, Kevin's mother took her into the house as an au pair. The girl turned out to be in a domestic sense smart, quick-witted, and soon became indispensable, especially after the death of Kevin's parents. Nancy worked at a minor position, was an engineer in a research institute, but there was no time for housekeeping and no habits either. Why bother trying if Doris would do everything? So in time, their resignation to childlessness coincided with changes in their lives. Kevin became a businessman, and Nancy became unemployed. Her research institute, already useless, ceased to exist. This plunged the woman, who was a long way from retirement, into despair. Kevin consoled his wife as best he could. "Don't work. You have enough money now. Have a rest." "Don't you understand, Kevin? It's not about money. It's about life losing its meaning. You've got a job, and I've got what? Nobody needs me, a barren, infertile, good-for-nothing, worthless, aging woman. Do you need me? Don't make things up. I'm just a nuisance to you. If it weren't for me, you'd have found a young, beautiful, capable of bearing children." Such a mood of his wife frightened Kevin, but how to help her he did not know. He even promised to take her to work, even as a secretary, but she refused. Depression prevented her from even getting up in the morning to walk her husband to work, and then it turned out that the matter was even more serious. Nancy had lost her appetite. All food seemed intolerable, which irritated her enormously. "Doris, did you not salt the omelette at all? And the eggs must be rotten. They smell of fish, I think, or something. The cottage cheese is too fatty, and there's too much sugar." "Ah, you've completely forgotten how to cook." Doris wondered. Everything was cooked as usual, even better than usual. After all, now Kevin brought home only the best products, and she bought not at the store, but at the market, where everything is fresh and tasty. So after suffering for a few days from the nagging of the landlady, she, strangely enough, was the first to realize what was wrong. "I'm thinking, Nancy, they say they've got these doughs now. Why don't we get some?" "What kind of test, Doris? Water makes me sick, and you and your pies." Nancy nearly cried. "No, I don't mean the dough. My neighbor's daughter had the same problem, and then she bought some kind of test at the drugstore. I don't know how to use it, but my daughter bought it, and it turned out that she was pregnant. Pregnant, that is, already with a big belly. I wish you'd try it, because you're just like your neighbor's daughter. You can't eat, and you smell wrong, and you don't sleep well." Nancy listened to the housekeeper's chatter, stunned. Could it be that what she had dreamed of for nearly 20 years had finally come true? She hadn't even noticed. Only Doris, who had never been pregnant or married, had guessed. Nancy shook off her stupor, fussed. "Where did you say these tests were?" "At the drugstore." "Run, hurry up." "No, wait, I'll do it." "Oh, really, Doris? Is there gonna be a baby?" "Oh, phew, phew, don't jinx it." It turned out that Doris was right. Her mistress was pregnant. However, Kevin was also informed about it, and his delight was unbounded. After so many years of waiting, after despair and hopelessness, suddenly, it was hard to believe. But how could I not believe it when several different tests showed a single and undeniable result? The next day, excited, hardly believing in her happiness, Nancy went to the doctor, got the final confirmation, and got on the register. The waiting began. Pregnancy was difficult. Her husband and housekeeper did not let the dust fall on Nancy, endlessly discussing the upcoming happy event. Despite all the difficulties, just in time, a healthy and beautiful girl, Margaret, was born. Is it any wonder that for the 3 adults, this long-awaited child became the center of the universe? All life was now built around Margaret, her first smile, her first tooth, her first word. Any, the most unconscious action of an infant seemed a sign of genius. It evoked admiration, the desire to thank the heavens and the girl herself for the fact that she appeared in life, filling it with meaning, joy, hope for a better future. Margaret grew accustomed to this admiration, taking it for granted. She knew no denial of anything. She felt like a princess, and when she grew up, she felt like a queen. She studied, however, well. The adoration of her parents seemed to spread to the rest of the people. She was loved by teachers, peers, and neighbors, and it seemed that there was a reason, a beautiful, capable girl, going through life with a dazzling smile, looking at the world wide open, cheerful eyes. How could one not love her? Some people really said, "You spoil her too much." But who set those limits? Who could say what was too much and what was in moderation? And Margaret wasn't exactly a spoiled, sassy. No, just a confident girl, that's all. The father began to notice something wrong with his daughter's behavior only when she turned 16. It was at this time that Nancy became seriously ill. Maybe the disease had matured before, but she just did not pay attention, and when it became impossible to turn a blind eye to the painful condition, it turned out that it was too late to treat. Doctors were frustrated, and the age of the patient was no longer young. The daughter seemed to sympathize with her mother, worried about her, but she was more concerned about herself, about her way of life not changing in the slightest. "Margaret, is Mommy going to the hospital?" Doris asked shyly, seeing that Margaret was not going to the hospital at all, but on her own merry way. "Oh, go yourself today. I already went last week. Say hi to your mom." "I can't today. We're going on a camping trip." "I can't let the guys down, can I?" The girl answered, "Yes, Yes, yes, sighed Doris, who had always regarded Margaret not only with love, but also with a kind of slavish adoration. I'll go, of course, I'll tell her. Take a walk, my dear, take a walk. When you're young and green, take a walk. It was a saying Doris used to justify Margaret's antics. Kevin gloomed, looking at such behavior of his daughter. How can one treat his mother with such indifference, knowing that she may have nothing left to live for? Once he tried to express it to his daughter Margaret, but the answer frightened him even more. "Oh, Daddy, what are you saying? She doesn't have long to live, but at least she's lived, and so have you, by the way. You accuse me of selfishness, but what are you like? You and Mom have lived in your own pleasure. You had everything and youth and maturity, and now it's getting to old age, so what? Everything's fine. Where have you seen old age without disease? And where have you seen life without end? You lived at your own pleasure, even had a child, me, that is, when you were already 40. It seems that you gave birth to me so that I could serve you in your old age. Have you asked me if I'm satisfied with it? After all, you have Doris. I love you very much, but I don't want to ruin my life. What are you talking about, daughter? That's not why we gave birth to you so late. It's just the way it is, and still Mom probably deserves better treatment. Kevin said, confused. Where am I treating her badly? I treat her fine. I go to the hospital when I have time, and when I don't, what am I supposed to do? I have to study. I need to be involved in the community, not sit with my sick mother all day long. Besides, why are you burying her? Maybe she'll outlive us all too. Nancy, of course, outlived no one. She passed away. Margaret cried at the cemetery, cried at home, but my father didn't feel that she was really grieving. She would cry, but then she would jump up and go about her business, remembering not to put on makeup or dress up. What can you do? She was 18 years old at that time. She had already entered the institute, the same one where Kevin studied many years ago. Almost independent life began, without her mother, and it was a fun life. Margaret studied at the institute without much effort, perceiving the student years as an opportunity to have fun and experience new impressions. Her father did not refuse her money, loved her, and after Nancy's death, he also pitied her and saw her as the only relative. She saw in her father a similar source of good income, which allowed her to visit fashionable resorts during vacations and clubs and restaurants during the rest of the time. Margaret did not limit herself in anything, lived to the fullest. In the second year, she was almost expelled for truancy, but only thanks to her father's efforts, she stayed in the institute and even began to take her studies more seriously, but more for looks. Her father tried to influence her, but it was useless. Margaret learned to manipulate Kevin much more skillfully, and then it came to the final hurdle. The daughter ran over a man. The victim appears to be alive, but somehow that doesn't make it any easier. Kevin was not going to put his daughter in jail, but if you leave this case without proper attention, there will be no end. I mean, there would be an end, but a terrible one. The father understood that Margaret might be quiet for a while, but he could not expect her to take her mind off it. We have to stop this outrage, or her antics will do no good. He thought as he hurried to the scene of the accident caused by his daughter, who had finally lost her conscience. Margaret didn't think her behavior was too reprehensible at all. What was she doing that was so terrible? She had entered the institute. She was studying well as she could, as well as she studied, not worse than others, by the way. But the rest of her behavior, thanks to Doris saying, was justified by the same young green. And that's really an argument. But really, to think about it, how much of that youth was left? And here she will graduate from the institute, get married, have children, and that's it. After all, this is the end of carefree life. You might say, that is, the beginning of a completely different life from which to expect special surprises are not necessary. There will be only worries and hardships. No, youth should be used to the fullest, and if someone does not like it, it is not her problem. Father must have grown old. He doesn't understand anything. He doesn't remember his youth. On this unhappy day, everything was as usual. She woke up towards lunchtime when her father was gone, and Doris, the faithful Doris, did not even think of making any remarks. She, as always when she saw Margaret awake, rejoiced, alighted upon her. "Are you awake, my darling?" Oh, Daddy was angry again. Angry that you came late, that you slept so long, but I didn't let him wake you up. You were tired, all in your studies. "Oh, Doris dear, you are the only one who understands me," sighed Margaret. "Will you make me something to eat for breakfast? I'll go to the bathroom. Come, fishy. I'll make you something. What kind of juice do you want? Orange or pomegranate?" "Well, pomegranate. It's kind of healthy, but you know what? Don't make any." "I'll drink coffee juice, then something else. I'll have a sandwich with fish, and all this porridge, eggs, don't do that." "Oh, of course. Why should you eat too much? It will be hard on your tummy." Doris agreed with every statement of her favorite. If Margaret had said that she wanted grated bricks for breakfast, the housekeeper would not have been surprised, but would have run to prepare this strange dish. When she came out of the bathroom, a fresh, fragrant Margaret ate her breakfast, kissed Doris, and went, as she said, to live her life. She didn't want to do it herself, so she went to a beauty parlor. I'd borrowed the money from my father the day before. After that, it was still necessary to visit a fashion boutique, to buy there an outfit, because summer is coming, vacations, which means travel and adventure. The time of very big purchases is approaching, but it is already later, and now it is necessary to dress up only for visiting the club, which is also important. Having had a great time at the club, Margaret started to go home. She remembered that she shouldn't make her father too angry, because she had to spend this summer vacation and prepare for it. But the time for fun flew by so fast, and no matter how hard she tried to go home early and in as decent a manner as possible, it didn't quite work out. Oh well, maybe her father wouldn't notice. There's nothing criminal about her behavior. Indeed, she didn't drink so much alcohol that she couldn't drive. She'd done it many times before, and it had always worked out fine. Margaret was not drunk, but she drank a little bit. But she realized that you cannot drive fast in such a state. You must be careful. But it was almost night now. There were almost no people, no cars either. So Margaret put on the gas. She liked to drive fast, and this time everything would have gone without any accidents if suddenly, out of the blue, some rascal had not come out on the road at the most inopportune moment. It didn't seem to be a big jolt, but the pedestrian, a young man, fell to the ground and didn't move. Margaret, on shaky legs, got out of the car, approached the victim. "Oh my God, what happened? Are you alive? What happened? What happened? What do we do?" With the wrong hands, she touched the pulse on the guy's neck, seemingly alive, but unconscious and bleeding. No, she can't do anything on her own. Flee the scene. Oh no, that's even worse. She can't do that. She pulled out her cell phone, dialed her father's number. "Daddy, I need your help right away. I accidentally hit a man." Panicked, she mumbled into the phone. "He's alive, I think, but unconscious, and I don't know what to do. There's blood. I don't know, I'm scared." "Don't do anything, wait. I'll be there in 10 minutes. In a metallic tone, the father said, "But thank God he's coming. He'll sort it out. Of course he will. Yes, it won't be for nothing. It'll start now. I told you, you can't do that." Why? Why? How can I ask him for money now? But never mind, somehow. It's not about that now. We have to think. And that one, he jumped out too. Why were you sneaking around at night? You've got me in so much trouble now. Where am I going on vacation now? Father's coming. It's going to start. Kevin arrived, as promised, 10 minutes later. He looked menacingly at his daughter, approached the victim. "You didn't call anywhere else? Didn't call an ambulance?" he asked Margaret grimly. "No, of course not. I was waiting for you." The daughter replied pitifully, frightened and confused, although the first fright had already passed. "You waited while the man was bleeding. And if he had died, I called the doctors. I hope everything will be all right. That's why I waited for you. I knew you'd do it, but where would I have called? I'd have called the ambulance, and they'd have called the police, and what would have happened? You want me to go to jail, don't you?" Margaret whimpered. "If I wanted that, you would have been there a long time ago." Kevin said irritably, "Jail? Not jail, but you need to be reformed, and I'll do it, you'll see." "You do it, Daddy, you do it." "I'll do whatever you want me to do. Just please, this case has to be taken care of somehow." The matter was, of course, taken care of, thanks to Kevin's efforts. He called the doctors, the victim was taken to a private clinic, and the police were not informed. The young man's condition was determined to be serious, but not hopeless. Father and daughter calmed down somewhat and went home. Margaret went to bed, hoping that the incident would not have any serious consequences. The father would grumble a little, and it would be all right. It wasn't the first time. She would have to act like a good girl for a few days, but what can you do? Sometimes you have to, because it was really her fault. But in the morning there were some unpleasant surprises. Father woke Margaret up at 8 o'clock in the morning. "Daddy, what's wrong?" She mumbled unhappily. "I just fell asleep, didn't you? Don't you remember what happened? You almost killed a man yesterday, and now you're going to sleep?" "No, sweetheart, you're not going to get away with it. Get up," I said. "Get dressed. Your partying is over. Let's go to the hospital and talk to the victim." Kevin said decisively, "What's there to go to him for? We could call him, see how he's doing. Or you can go alone, Dad." Margaret asked pitifully. "I'm ashamed of him, honestly, Daddy. I'm so ashamed, both to him and to you. Why don't you go and make the arrangements? Give him some money? Or something, I don't know what. And I'll sleep. I'm very tired. I don't feel well." Margaret whimpered in a child's voice, hoping it would impress her father. But no, Kevin was as serious and even stern as ever, something Margaret was not at all used to. "I told you, get up and let's go. I didn't go out at night, and I didn't run anyone over. You need to go see this man yourself. Apologize to him, talk him out of filing a police report, and don't think it's going to go away just like that. We need to find out what his injuries are and see what you're in for if they're serious." "Why are you scaring me, Dad? How serious? What could I be in danger of? What are you gonna do? Send me to prison for reform?" "Thanks. I didn't expect this from you." "I didn't expect a lot of things from you either," replied my father, apparently not going to give up on his scheme. "Quickly get ready and let's go. And do not get ready like you do for your parties, but normally comb your hair, get dressed, wash your face, and that's it. Don't tease people with your outfits and your coloring, and there's no time for that. All right, I'm gonna go play the good girl, genuinely remorseful, ready for redemption and punishment. I don't know what you're doing. You got some kind of show on your mind? Okay, I'll apologize. What's the big deal? Margaret went to pack, under the sympathetic glances of Doris, who, of course, did not know all the details of the night incident, but sincerely sympathized with her pet. Even if she had known, she would not have dared to contradict her master, though she did not understand his action in regard to poor Margaret. Where was it ever seen that a girl was tortured by her own father in the morning? Father and daughter drove to the hospital in silence, dissatisfied with each other. At the information desk, Kevin asked about the condition of the patient brought in yesterday. His name was Alvin. They were told that the young man had regained consciousness, no life-threatening injuries. He has a broken leg and a slight concussion, so he won't be an invalid when he recovers. Margaret asked. Probably not. I think he'll make a full recovery. The body is young. The fracture is not very complicated. There probably won't even be a limp left. They answered them. See, Dad, why did we have to come all the way out here at the crack of dawn? He's fine. It's just a leg and arm, but that's all. Don't frown. I'm here. I'll apologize, I told you. But I'm not going to lie on my feet. He's a good one, hanging around the roads in the middle of the night, probably drunk himself. Margaret had already completely calmed down about what had happened and the consequences her father was frightening her with. No, you're incorrigible. Kevin said irritably. How can you talk like that about a man you incapacitated? What will my apology do to him? Will he grow a new leg or something? This can be settled very simply with money. That's fine. If you have money, ask him how much he'll settle for. Or are you going to ride on someone else's coattails as usual? All right, let's go see our patient. Now I'll start apologizing if you want your daughter to be humiliated. Margaret made her way determinedly to the room. Hello, she said, not very friendly. Is your name Alvin? I'm Margaret. It's just, I did a bit of a number on you last night. I relaxed a little. It's a night street. There are no people. So I lost my guard for a moment, and then you jumped out. Why are you so careless on the streets at night? That's what happened, yes, but that's not what I mean. I'm sorry. In fact, I came to apologize and ask how you are doing. Do you need anything? Business? Well, as you can see, my leg's broken, but the rest is all right. Do you need anything? Yes, everything seems to be here. The young man answered. Of course they do. It's a private clinic. Everything is paid for. Medicines, procedures. You don't have to worry about that. Well, and in general, do not worry. Everything will pass. The leg will heal. The body is young, right? Yeah, I guess so. Nothing like this has ever happened to me before. Alvin answered languidly. Well, if you're careful, it won't happen again. We've been told that you won't even have a limp, so you'll be all right. The doctors here are good, so don't worry, lie down, get well. I'll leave you my phone number. If you need anything, call me. Everything will be, I think, at the highest level. Kevin came into the room and looked disapprovingly at his daughter, who was talking to the victim, not at all as she should. She caught the look in her father's eye, and then she looked up. Yes, so I'm wildly apologizing to you. I promise all the support, and I'm ashamed, honestly. Yeah, well, what's the big deal? Things happen, answered Alvin and looked at Kevin. I'm the father of this car enthusiast. All right, Margaret, you go out and sit in the hallway. I need to talk to the young man. Okay, I'd love to. Good day, young man. Get well. Eat lots of oranges. They have calcium, but I think they don't have potassium. But calcium, It's in milk and cottage cheese. Click on that too. Margaret could not resist and hurriedly headed for the exit of the ward. Go already, her father said angrily to her, and Margaret left the men alone. She sat down on the sofa in the corridor and, yawning desperately, irritably began to ponder the meaning of her stay in this sad institution. Why had he brought me here? He could have gone alone. It's clear that this idiot only wants money, not my apologies. It's possible that he threw himself in front of the car on purpose. He saw the car was expensive, so he could milk the owners. Passers-by often do that. By the way, I've seen it in movies. He didn't spare his own leg, and I'm sitting here not having a good night's sleep because of him. Kevin sat down next to Alvin's bunk. Yeah, my daughter's not used to apologizing. You'll have to excuse me for her, too. You've been hurt, I understand, but I hear you're not going to press charges, are you? I'm willing to pay whatever it takes. That won't be necessary at all. Coldly, Alvin replied, I'm not going to report her. I'm thankful to be alive. Besides, you didn't leave me on the road, but sent me to a private clinic, which you paid for. I'm used to doing everything on my own and counting only on myself. Thank you very much, but because of the injury, you're going to have all sorts of difficulties. And I think that we have to help you in some way to correct the situation, that is, to eliminate the difficulties that will arise in connection with this accident. Again, thank you, but you will hardly be able to solve the difficulties that my injury will cause. Alvin grinned, and yet, Kevin insisted. He really wanted to help the boy. The thing is, I'm a villager. I grew up there with my grandmother. She lives there now in the village. I came to the city myself. I'm studying at the institute. I have 1 year left. The vacation started. I was going to go there to my grandmother, to help her there in the vegetable garden, and in general, after all, she's not old anymore. And now I don't know how I will manage with my cast. Kevin began to ask the young man about his studies, and found out that he was studying at the same institute as Margaret, but had not met her. Perhaps because the girl did not appear at lectures that often. Alvin was a serious student. He was a serious guy because he knew that everything depended only on him, on his abilities and diligence, and there was no one to help him. But the one who counted on his help was his grandmother, Wendy, who raised him after the death of his parents. Kevin listened to the story, frowning and thinking hard. When Alvin stopped talking, he smiled and said, Well, young man, I have a mutually beneficial proposal for you. I hope you will accept it. By doing so, I will help you and you will help me. And he began to outline his plan. Kevin came out of the room and found his daughter flirting with the young doctor. Her father did not hesitate to interrupt the flirtation, taking Margaret by the elbow and dragging her to the exit. Oh, Papa, why don't you let me talk to a man? We were talking about Alvin's health, by the way. This doctor, his name is Thomas. Well, he's sure there's nothing wrong with this victim. Well, how'd you work it out? How much did it cost you? Don't worry when I graduate. I'll pay you back. Let's go to the car. I'll tell you how I made a deal with him. Putting his daughter in the salon, he did not tolerate objection's voice, told her about what awaits her in the next 3 months. You've crippled a man, my soul. And there's no money for that. He was going to go to the village to his grandmother to help her with the vegetable garden and other domestic issues, but now he can't. He needs to take care of himself. So Alvin and I have decided to do this. You go with him to his village, and there you take good care of the injured man, through your fault, and also do all sorts of household chores that he cannot do through your fault. Is this a joke? What village, Dad? What are you doing? I'm on vacation. I'm not going to kill them to take care of Alvin and his sick leg, let alone his grandmother. What can I do in the village if I've never been there and have no idea what to do there? Margaret replied unhappily, not yet believing her father's intentions to be serious. Yes, that is my omission, and now it will be corrected. You will go and nurse and learn everything. It's nothing. But if you don't, Alvin will file a complaint. Court proceedings will start, and I doubt you'll stay out. I mean, if you don't even get sent to a penal colony, you'll be sentenced to corrective labor for a much longer period than 3 months. I'm not going to buy you out. I'm telling you that right now. And think about your reputation. You'll be out of school, no profession, nothing. Dad, if you're serious, it's too cruel. Well, agree it's inhuman to send me to some unknown place to do absolutely unknown things. No, tell me you're kidding. Tell me you made a deal with this Alvin guy. Paid him all the money he needed, anything. Please, I'll even agree. I'll completely change my lifestyle, but please don't scare me like that. Already started to believe in the words of her father, the girl. I'm not scaring you. I'm telling you correctly that everything will be as I said, and let's finish this conversation. Bargaining is not appropriate here. The father said sneeringly. Margaret, of course, did not fully believe in his words. That is, she thought that her father would cool down and cancel this monstrous decision. After all, she had one more remedy, which had so far helped her without fail, tears. She drove home quite calmly, saving up those tears to pour them out at home, especially in front of witnesses, in front of Doris, who would surely be on her side. She was not a very good defender, of course. She dared not say a word against her master, but still. When Margaret entered the apartment, she burst into tears and, without a word, rushed to her room. Doris frantically ran around the apartment. What's wrong, Kevin? What about Margaret? Where have you been? Who hurt her? She hurt herself. And it would be nice if it was just herself. Help her pack her things. She's going away for 3 months. The housekeeper rushed to Margaret's room, hoping to find out the details of what had happened, and she was not mistaken. The girl, sobbing, told her what her father was going to do to her. Doris jumped out of her room and, for the first time in her life, probably, ran to Kevin's office, launching herself at him with angry accusations. What on earth are you up to? You're going to do this to your own child. Where are you sending her, the poor girl? To what village? To take care of what kind of man? Go away, Doris. Don't interfere with my work, replied Kevin. You work, but why ruin the child? Your only God-given daughter, a bitter orphan. Would Nancy know what you're going to do with her only daughter? Do you even know that this child of yours almost killed and maimed a man? And you're suggesting we let it go without any consequences? Let her go on walking. Let her go on racing through the streets at night. Let her hit everyone. Is that what you want? Do you realize how this could end? Prison, that's what. Let him live in the country for 3 months. Maybe he'll get his brains back. You, Adaman's bloodline, you'd finally get your brains back. Who did she kill? Our bright angel? She hit a slightly drunken fool who was walking the streets at night, and for that she sent a child to the village. Have you lived in the village yourself? I've lived there. I know what it's like there. And the girl, how will she feel there? Will she get better there? You'll take her out of there sick. Is that what you want? Stop it, Doris. No one's ever been hurt by life in the country. It's better than hanging out in the city or in the resorts. And leave me alone. It's her fault, and she has to answer for it. You can't do this to Margaret. Wait a minute, Kevin. Why don't we do this while we're at it? Why don't I go to the country for her? And I'll take care of this man and his grandmother, and what else is there to do? I'll do anything. I'll dig with my bare hands, but leave the girl alone. That's it, Doris. You leave me alone. If you're going to drive around the city at night and kill people, then you'll go to the village. But now I'm sorry. I've made my decision, and I'm not going to change it. Leave me alone, understand? Are you trying to give me a heart attack? No pleading, no tears, no threats, no mutual accusations. Nothing came of it. By the time Alvin was discharged from the hospital, he was met by Kevin's car, in which sat a gloomy, depressed Margaret. Together they drove to the village to visit the young man's grandmother. The drive was long, but the girl never uttered a single word. She never looked at the man who she thought had caused her such trouble in her life. When they finally arrived at Wendy's grandmother's house, and the girl saw where she was to spend the next 3 months, she burst into tears. Alvin got out of the car, went to say hello to her grandmother, and Margaret, once again, began to beg her father. "Daddy, I'm begging you, but you realize I'm going to die here, don't you? Don't leave me, please. That's it, you've punished me enough, I'm scared, you see? I understand and I agree. I'll stay home all the time. Help Aunt Doris. Do whatever you say, just please. Stop it, Margaret. It's done, and I'm not going backwards. I mean, I'll go back, but without you. You're going to stay here, and I don't see anything wrong with that. I'm not leaving you any money, so don't try to run away or get kicked out. You'll only make things worse for yourself. Now let's say goodbye." At the porch, Alvin was hugging his grandmother, Wendy. She was overjoyed at her grandson's arrival, but horrified that he had arrived in a cast and on crutches. "Don't worry, Grandma, I'm doing fine. I'll tell you later how and what happened, and my leg will soon be completely fine. You'll see. I'd like you to meet Margaret. She'll be staying with us for the summer, helping you around the house. I told you about her on the phone." "Yeah, I know. Hello, Margaret. Come in. I've prepared a room for you. You can rest there from the road, then eat, and tomorrow we'll do the work," the old woman said kindly. She looked a little like Doris, the housekeeper, and that reassured Margaret a little. Maybe the old woman would be kind enough not to burden her with silly jobs that she didn't understand at all. She was taken to a prepared room, small, but neat and bright. Of the furniture, there was only a simple iron bed, as in a hospital, a closet, and a bedside table. Well, at least it's not so scary. The girl sighed. "I thought I was going to live in a stable." She put her suitcase near the closet, decided to sort everything out later, and lay down on the bed with clean linen. She wanted to cry, but she realized that in this situation, tears would not help. Her father had already left, and these people, even if they felt sorry for her, what could they fix? Soon the hostess came in, inviting Margaret to the table. "I've prepared everything. It'll be delicious. Come on, darling," Wendy called. Margaret had no appetite, but it was awkward to refuse. Besides, she wanted to see what dishes were in store for her in the near future. "Here's some soup for you." The hostess put a plate in front of her. "I'm sorry, I didn't know what kind of food you are used to. I was guided by my grandson. Alvin likes soup very much, so you should eat it. It's all your own. Don't think. Put sour cream in it." Margaret looked almost with horror at the plate, where in the red broth were floating finely chopped vegetables, eggs, and meat. Margaret didn't want to eat anything, much less something like this. "I didn't know your tastes. It's clear you're used to other things, but if you have to live with us, you'll get used to it. Try the pies too. These with homemade jam and these with cabbage. Don't hesitate to try them." Margaret politely scooped up a spoonful of this strange soup and swallowed it. The taste was disgusting. But she didn't want to quarrel with her hosts, and even less to offend them. "Yes, thank you. It must be delicious, but I don't feel like eating right now. And besides, I got seasick in the car. I'm sorry. I'll have some tea and a cake." Feeling like she was going to burst into tears, Margaret said, "God, should I eat some slop for 3 months?" She thought with horror. "I wish my father had killed me. It's like prison, slop, a cell. What's the difference? Although yes, in prison I would have to sit longer. Probably, and besides, there are criminals there. They would start to abuse me, and here people seem to be not bad. No, okay, I'll put up with it somehow, but my dad's wrong if he thinks being in a place like this is going to fix me." Wendy apparently saw that her guest was in extremely upset feelings and promised, "I see you want something tastier, girl. Well, I'll roast a chicken tonight. Won't I, Alvin? You wouldn't say no to chicken, would you?" "No, I wouldn't. I can imagine you guys cooking chicken around here." I thought Margaret, poor peasant, she probably doesn't know how normal people eat. But what am I supposed to do? Not starve to death. What could I eat here myself? I can't imagine. But even if there was a good cafe or restaurant, I don't have any money." And Wendy suddenly said, "Margaret, if you're here to help, cut your nails. They'll get in the way. And if you break them, it will hurt." The girl looked at her perfectly grown nails in horror. "Is there a beauty parlor here? Or even a manicurist? I can't just cut them off. I need to have them professionally removed." "Take them off? What do you put them on? We don't That's good," Margaret thought. "What am I going to be like here in 3 months? And how will I recover after such a vacation in the village?" Meanwhile, Alvin finished his lunch and stood up on his crutches. "I think Margaret can handle her claws on her own. You, Granny, lie down and rest for a while. You can take it easy now. I'll show our assistant where everything is and familiarize her with the work. But the nails, yes, to avoid injuries. Scissors?" Thank you. I have my own. I'll do them tonight. But in the meantime, give me a tour of your estate." Margaret grinned wryly. "Clip your fingernails first and dress comfortably. Do you have a tracksuit or anything like that?" "I've got everything, don't worry." Margaret replied defiantly, heading off to her room to make herself look fit for the village. That is, she didn't know how to dress in the village, and she didn't have anything to wear. The outfits she had brought with her, with the expectation of striking the landscape to her heart's content. Alvin, however, was not very much impressed. She examined Margaret's costume, rather with a sneer, and began to introduce her to the yard and house. Well, not a grand estate, but still knowing what and where is necessary, and also familiarizing yourself with what you will have to do. Here, as you see the vegetable garden, when it comes to business, I'll show you what there is to pull and what to water. Oh, God? Margaret sighed. How much do you have to pull, much less water? Do you have to go for water with a pail? If you have learned to command the buckets like that, Emilia, they will bring everything themselves. But if not, then apparently, yes. Well, wait a girl to be discouraged. It's not so terrible as you imagine. By the way, my grandmother is not some illiterate old village woman. She has a higher education. She worked as a school principal for a long time and did not curve herself after the institute and lives in the village. She doesn't consider it humiliation, so don't worry. She knows how to educate people, both small and big. Well, let's see how she brings me up. I'll tell you right away, I don't like it here, and I don't like this yard either. What kind of a mess is this? If your grandmother is not the last person in the village, people should help her. Former students, for example, I don't know who else, neighbors, friends. You shouldn't have brought me here at all. Neither me nor Grandma dragged you here, in case you hadn't noticed. It was your father's initiative, who's concerned about your lifestyle. For better or worse, you'll have to get used to a simple life. By the way, this is called a chicken coop. With chickens will not be a lot of fuss, although they, of course, people like that, for them to clean and feed and watch. You see, everything is fenced with netting. It's to prevent them from flying all over the garden and pecking what you don't want. Why don't you go catch some? Why else? Margaret asked squeamishly. Why else? Are you going to eat something? That's why you have to catch a chicken, and then everything else. It's quite normal. It's such a country life. Go on, go on, go on. That white one's better. What to catch them with? Do you have some kind of net, or I don't know, a net or something? No, we catch chickens with our hands. Go and catch them. It's no big deal. They're not wild animals. They won't eat you. Margaret went to the netted pen to catch a chicken. She did not think about what would happen next. She didn't know how to catch a chicken either. She thought that she could just walk up and get the right bird and try to do so. But all the chickens scattered, who went wherever. Kitty, there's a white one. I mean, no, chicken, chicken. Come to me, come to me. Look, here are my grains. Showing her empty palm, Margaret spoke as affectionately as possible. The chickens did not respond to her call. Realizing that persuasion was not an option, Margaret climbed into the pen and immediately fell to all fours, cursing and cursing. She got up and went to fetch the chicken that had been sentenced to slaughter. With difficulty, and falling several more times, she seized the unfortunate one, went out from behind the corral, approached Alvin, and only then noticed that he was laughing merrily. I think I was sent here to be corrected, not to be laughed at. Angrily, the girl said, You yourself should be corrected. If you have to do unpleasant hard work, can't you make it more comfortable? A net? I don't know. At least a rag of some kind, so that this chicken could be caught without getting soaked in mud. Here, take it. Take what? There's a hatchet. Put it on that plank and put its head on it, explained Alvin. What? Margaret was puzzled. Do I have to kill her? Well, you can't roast it alive. Then you have to pluck it. Margaret, still not believing what was happening, stood holding the chicken, which was fluttering nervously in her hands. The girl lowered her eyes to the bird, looked into its frightened black eye, and released it from her hands. Yes, you, yes, you. Gasping, she shouted and ran behind the house. There she sat down on the ground and cried. How do they live in these villages? It's cannibalism, she thought. To take care of this chicken, even to love it, and then to slaughter it, skin it, and eat it. How is that possible? How do they eat people they know? Well, okay, chicken is good. There are lots of chickens. They probably don't live long and don't have time to get so used to them. But I've seen this Aunt Wendy talking to a cow, stroking it like her own, and then killing it, making cutlets, and eating it. It's impossible. It's sadistic. She probably explained to her students about love for nature, animals, friends. It's not people who live here, but some freaks. Wiping her tears, she thought. There was a clatter of crutches. Alvin came and stood next to her. Why are you crying? You've never eaten meat, have you? Vegetarian? He asked mockingly. I've eaten everything, and I've eaten things you've never seen before, and I'll continue to do so, don't doubt it. But I've never killed anyone, and I've never had to eat anyone I knew alive either, I'm sorry. And I won't do it. I don't understand how this is possible. How do you live? It's not normal. You almost killed me, reminded Alvin. I wasn't trying to kill you on purpose. I wasn't chasing you. I wasn't going to eat you. It was just an accident, an unfortunate accident. I agree it was my fault. I'm whatever you want me to be, But understand, I can't even eat a chicken I've seen alive, warm. And you say chop off the head. How can you do that? It's idiotic. It's not idiotic. It's life, village life. If we eat only cabbage and carrots, we won't live long. You see how much work there is here, and you won't live either, and you'll be fine eating the chickens you've seen. And not just chickens. There's nothing awful about it. Of course it's not horrible for you, but you're welcome to carve whoever you want, and I'm not going to. I'm more of a seafood guy. Do you think fish are inanimate? Doesn't want to live? Or eat something, I don't know, mussels, octopus, oysters. By the way, the fish in the restaurant are also alive. They catch them from the aquarium and then fry them before your eyes, even if they're still twitching. Isn't that right? Well, yes, it happens. But for some reason it's not so bad for the fish, but it's bad for the bird. I'm not eating that chicken, okay? I'm not gonna look at it roasted, dead, whatever. Let it live or kill it yourself and eat it, and I'm not going to. Margaret wouldn't give up, but we'll see how much humanity you have. If you get hungry, you'll do something else. We'll see. Margaret muttered. She thought to herself, if my father knew what they were doing to me, he would kill you. The girl didn't think about what her father would do. She got up and went into the house. She would have to learn and learn a lot more. The chicken, of course, was slaughtered, roasted, served for dinner, but Margaret did not leave her room, although the appetizing aroma tantalized her, causing an unprecedented feeling of hunger. Wendy entered the room with a knock. "What's the matter, sweetheart? Are you feeling sorry for the chicken?" She asked without mockery, but rather with sympathy. Imagine that. The girl said resentfully, "I don't understand it. I'm not judging anyone, okay? You have to eat. You have to cook. You have to do everything. But I don't understand how you can eat someone you've known for years. And just 5 minutes ago, she was alive, struggling, looking at me. How can you eat her? Go try it." Wendy grinned. "But yes, I understand. The first time is hard for someone who's not used to it. And Alvin's wrong. I shouldn't have forced you to do it. You'll understand a lot once you're here. I guess I'll have to live here, but I'll understand." "No, I can't understand it. I don't want to, I'm sorry. And I won't be here long, and I won't need it in my future life." "Stop it, girl, stop it," Wendy said sternly, and Margaret suddenly saw clearly that this was no ordinary kind old woman, but a teacher, and a teacher, apparently, who knew what she was doing. "It is clear that for now it is difficult for you, but then everything will go normally. You will understand everything about chickens and everything else. We raise animals for food and not only for our own. So, girl, stop playing dumb. If you're going to live in the village, don't pretend to be a hereditary princess." Wendy left the room. Margaret sighed. Yes, she understood that chickens and cows were eaten, but it was hard for her to realize it fully. "I'm sure it's not just for the first time. I can't live like them at all," she thought stubbornly. "But you'll have to," said the harmful inner voice. Yes, she had to learn everything soon. Where could she go? At the end of this long and hard day, she asked Alvin, "Where do they wash? Can showers at least be taken here?" "We don't keep showers. There's a bathhouse if you want one, and flood it. I myself, I can't chop wood or heat the stove. My hands are full of crutches. Thanks to you, sorry to remind you. So you'll have to learn on your own and drown the bathhouse. It's no big deal." "Chopping wood is not a woman's job," Margaret said glumly. "I understand, and don't think, Margaret, that I'm saying this to mock you. I mean, how am I going to do it? And it's ridiculous to ask Grandma, too. She's going to try to hire someone anyway, and that means you have to pay. Alvin explained, "Who stopped you from taking money from my father? It would have been enough for 10 helpers, much more skillful than me. But no, we are poor but proud. How will I chop wood? Have you thought about it? What if I get hurt? Don't worry, no one will make you chop 2 difficult logs. Besides, I'll be there to show you." The chopping of wood was almost injury-free, for a few rather large splinters should not be mistaken for serious trouble. Wendy pulled them out quickly and painlessly, saying, "Take care of your hands. You've got a lot of work to do, and you're not going to get hurt. Take care of your hands." Did Margaret, or did she not take care of her hands? Did she not take care of them? But that was in a previous life, and that's what she had to take care of her hands for. For work, milking cows, cleaning dung, chopping wood. In the village the next day, Wendy got her up at dawn and took her to the barn to milk the cow and then drive her out to the herd. But couldn't it be done later? The girl was angry, not having slept well. To get up so early because of a cow? Your kind soul, you are sorry that animals are killed, and you are not sorry if she will stand like this, with a full udder and suffer. If instead of going out to pasture, she stands in a stuffy barn, asked Wendy. "I feel sorry for myself. I want to sleep," whined Margaret. "That's it. That's your humanity. You feel sorry for the animals, but when you want to sleep, you don't care about them. And when you're hungry, you'll eat them with pleasure. You think of yourself first, the cow too. I don't know how to milk. I'm going to hurt her, and then what?" Margaret tried to give up her unpleasant job. "You can't do anything. I'll show you everything. It's a simple science. Science may not be easy, but it wasn't easy either." Margaret had never realized that a cow had to be milked so long and so hard. Rising from the process and with difficulty straightening her back and aching arms, she asked Wendy, "How did they milk 2 or 3 cows at a time? It's a beastly thing to do. My arms fall off. You're not used to milking 10 cows. Don't cry. You'll see in a week. You won't notice how you'll milk her. It's no big deal." Of course, there was nothing to be afraid of, but after this morning milking, she had to weed the garden, carry water, do something else. "Now go and get some rest," Wendy told her. Margaret, entering her room, realized with amazement that it was only noon, and she was already so tired. It would be good to be seriously ill now, and have Daddy come and get me and see what's the matter with me. And regret doing that to me. That Alvin, all he had to do was jump out on the road like a fool and think his leg was broken and he'd heal. I think my back's broken too. It hurts like crazy. All my arms ache. But before she could rest, Wendy came into the room. "What's the helper doing?" "Let's go make dinner." "What dinner?" "I can't cook. I can't even eat." "I'm tired. I don't want to." Almost crying, the girl replied, "What do you mean I don't want to, if I have to? Get up, come on." The landlady was not going to give up. "Why on earth would you make fun of me like that? After all, I don't need my legs to cook dinner. Let Alvin help me. I think he has his hands where they belong. That's what women are supposed to do. Come on, let's go. Should women chop wood too? Do women have to carry water? What do men have to do in your village? I don't understand this division of labor. Men have a lot of work to do too. Alvin can't do it now. His leg is broken. Stop arguing. You didn't come here to argue. You came here to learn how to do things." "No, I can't cook, and I'm not going to learn. I don't need it." "What do you mean you don't need it? You're a woman. You should know how to cook. How are you going to live?" "I'm going to live fine. I'm going to live the way I've been living. I have a housekeeper." Margaret didn't give up. And if the housekeeper refuses to work for you, what would you do then? Starve to death yourself and torture your family? Wendy was beginning to lose her patience. I won't torture anyone. One will refuse, the other will. If the housekeeper refuses, where will she go without my money? And if you run out of money, then what will you do? I'm not going to run out. I'm going to work and earn a lot. I'll have everything, don't worry. I don't understand how you live. You work from morning till night, and by the way, you're an intelligent woman. You graduated from an institute you worked. And now what? How old are you? And you continue to work. Is this, in your opinion, a life? In my opinion, that's what life is. Work is the only thing that keeps me afloat. I don't want to be afloat like you, so that in my old age my back hurts, my hands hurt, everything hurts, and my assistant comes once a year, and not every time. But grumbling, Margaret got up and groaned, both from the pain in her back and in her legs, and wandered to the kitchen. I don't like this kind of life, understand, Wendy? I don't know how you manage it, but I wasn't born for it. It's not what I'm used to, and I don't want to be used to it. So when I left here, I'm not going back to the country. If you, like my father, think that I'll get better from such a life, you're mistaken. I won't get better. I'll get worse. Now you probably think that I am the worst, lazy, wicked, so and so. But by the way, I'm not like that at all. I was normal in the city. I was fun, everybody loved me, and no one would ever think I was doing anything wrong. Except for your father, who kept you and took care of your problems. Wendy grinned. Oh, don't give me a hard time about it. You tell me what to do. All right, I'll do my time in this prison and see if my father will be happy about the change. Why do you talk about your father like that, Papa? He loves you. Peel the potatoes. Don't you know how to do that too? I not only don't know how to do it, I never eat potatoes, except occasionally in the form of chips. Potatoes are bad for you. Margaret announced, I don't know what's good for you to eat, my dear, sighed the old woman, and so life went on day after day. Strange as it may seem, Wendy was right. Every day Margaret found it easier and easier to fulfill her daily duties. She learned a lot, got used to a lot. Only her own appearance horrified her more and more every day. The gorgeous manicure and pedicure were gone. The tan from the sun in the middle zone was uneven. The skin on her hands had become rough, and even the shape of her hands seemed worse than before. And the damned mosquitoes, they bit the girl so much that sometimes it seemed that they would eat her alive. Let the father admire what a beauty his daughter had become. Let him bite his elbows when I come back. Evil, she thought. But okay, father. It was much more frightening to think about how her old acquaintances would perceive her. If she came back, who would see her like this? They wouldn't recognize her. Her father had left her a phone, so she could talk to her friends sometimes. Naturally, she didn't tell anyone about milking cows or tilling potatoes. She said she was on vacation in Bali. Her father had bought her a trip. And to think that Margaret herself was in the countryside, working hard, such a thing could not even cross anyone's mind. One time, though, a cow almost gave her away. Margaret came to milk her cow, washed her udder, put it on a bench, and then the phone rang in her apron pocket. She picked up the phone, her chatterbox friend, asked where you were, and then the cow, dissatisfied with such a delay, suddenly howled. Oh, what have you got there? Even frightened my friend. How could she know how cows moo? It's just the guys. They are playing a prank. Margaret answered and interrupted the call, annoyingly slapping the cow on the side. Why do you have to cry at this very minute? You saw I was busy, and started milking. Yes, I managed to get rid of my friend, but when she arrives and they see her, it's no lie. They'll know what spa treatments she's had and what beaches she's been sunbathing on. Yes, I have such a view, as if I myself, this cow chewed and spit out. With horror thought the girl and imagined what it will be like for her to return home. How long would she have to clean herself up, hiding from everyone she knew? Alvin and Wendy also noticed the changes in Margaret, but they liked them. Perhaps they saw them as a sign that the girl was changing for the better. Indeed, when she went out in the morning to milk the cow or to do some other chores, she looked like an ordinary country girl in the chintz dress given by Wendy, in the simple kerchief covering her hair. She looked very simple and sweet, becoming closer and more understandable. Once Alvin even dared to have an informal conversation with her. In the afternoon, after some ordinary household chores, he said, "Did you bring your bathing suit? Let's go for a swim," cheerfully suggested the young man. "Do you have a place to swim here?" Margaret was surprised. Indeed, there was no river nearby. There was only a small muddy lake where only boys dared to bathe. "There is a river, but it's a long way to it. We'll go on foot, because I'm not riding a bicycle now, you know." "Well, let's go and see what kind of river there is. I'd love to take a dip. Of course, I have a bathing suit in the village after all," went to rest. The girl grinned. It didn't take more than an hour to get to the local beach, even with Alvin's crutches. On the beach, Margaret threw off her sundress and went into the water. Alvin, of course, didn't swim. He sat under a tree, looked at the girl, and realized that he liked her. "And still we are not a couple," he thought, looking at Margaret, who without simple clothes, in a beautiful swimsuit, again turned into an inaccessible beauty. In a little while she would go home and remember this summer with horror. Perhaps after what happened, we will become even strangers to each other. They had a good time, but Alvin felt that he could have nothing in common with this girl, and he was not mistaken. The summer months flew by, and with them Margaret's penal servitude ended. She went home, happy and contented. Margaret bade farewell to her hosts quite warmly, but no more. There were no promises to come again or to keep in touch. Margaret clearly wanted to forget the past. Undoubtedly, the past summer had had its effect on her. She really got her mind right. A year later, Margaret graduated from the institute and did quite well. Thanks to that, Kevin hired her at his firm. It is not known whether that summer link so influenced her, or perhaps Margaret simply matured, but she behaved differently at home. It was as if the girl realized for the first time that Doris was already very old, and it was difficult for her to manage the household alone. Margaret began to help the old housekeeper quite fully. Doris refused at first, even resented and cried, "What am I here for? Why did you mop the floors? Why did you cook? Is that your business? You need to study and go out sometimes. You only get to be young once. I've had my fun, Doris. I've got to get used to adult life, and I think you've had enough. You lived in the country when you were young, wasn't it hard?" "Yeah. When was that? What's there to remember?" "Yes, compared to city life, I'll tell you. It's work. When I arrived, I couldn't find a place for myself. What's there to do here? There's hot and cold water, radiators, washing in the machine, vacuuming. So it's not hard for me now. It's my business. And you should do your own and look for a fiancé, that's what. It's about time." But Margaret had no recollection of a life of debauchery. After coming from the village, she really did not meet friends for some time, embarrassed by her appearance. And then she suddenly realized that she was not interested in all these parties, clubs, hangouts, and just as Doris had once done, she didn't know where to put herself. She woke up before dawn and only when she opened her eyes did she remember that she no longer had to milk the cow. Instead of relief, I was bewildered. What to do then? Studying is studying, but also physical work, asking for a trained, accustomed to work, the body. And no fitness, no jogging did not help. Probably thanks to this she, though not brilliantly, but well graduated from the institute, then diligently worked, and her father had no reason to blush for his daughter. But he never mentioned the past to her, only rejoiced at how much Margaret, his indomitable in the past, had changed. With Alvin, Margaret, strangely enough, almost did not see, although he studied at the same institute. Margaret didn't want to get in his face. It was there in the village they had almost become friends, and now who knows what he would think. He would come up and reminisce in a friendly way about the cow, about how she caught chickens, and in front of all the honest people, or even worse, he would tell others how this proud beauty had lived in the village all summer at his service. After all, for all friends, acquaintances, Margaret spent that summer in Bali, and not that bad that her lies will be revealed. Far worse that everyone would find out about the village and her summer's activities. That's how they graduated without ever meeting or talking about anything. Alvin apparently still had the sense not to mention it to anyone and not to remind her. I realized it wasn't the fondest memory. And then, after graduation, Margaret calmed down. Now he can talk about her wherever he wants. They're in different realities now, and there's not much chance of them meeting. However, it turned out that this was not the case. One morning at a meeting where Margaret was present, Kevin introduced a new employee, this Alvin. It was a surprise and not at all pleasant. Margaret herself did not know that she was still angry with this young man for getting under the wheels of her car, for agreeing to Kevin's cruel plan, and now he had broken into the firm as if he had been called here. It means fearing exposure again. And it would have been okay before. When she was a student, there it was possible to translate everything into a joke, or hope that soon the training will be over and everyone will scatter who went where. And now she is not a cheerful student Margaret, but a leading specialist, a strict, stylish lady. And suddenly she'll break through someday. Remember when you used to chop wood? Determined not to let that happen, Margaret walked into her father's office. "Dad, what is this Alvin guy doing in our firm? Do you think I like it very much that he will be in front of my eyes again, hanging around all day long?" She asked indignantly. "He's not running around, he's working." "Strictly," said Kevin. "And I don't see what the problem is. He graduated from the institute with a red diploma, became a serious specialist. So what's the problem? I don't think there should be any friction between you two. That's just your opinion. Do you think I'm happy to see him and remember those vacations that you arranged with him in collusion?" Angrily interrogated the daughter. "Stop it, Margaret. First of all, you said I arranged it, but you don't hate seeing me every day, do you? And second of all, it's time to let bygones be bygones. We don't go to work to look at nice people, we go to work. So you're not going to fire him." My daughter frowned. "Do you have any idea what I had to endure?" "Like what? He beat you, tormented you, insulted you?" "As far as I remember, he never said a bad word. And on what grounds? Because he once agreed to take me up on a proposal I didn't think you'd like. I'm sorry, darling, but at this rate, I'll have to fire the whole firm. Suddenly, it will turn out that so-and-so in kindergarten, on your potty without asking, and another on the bus kicked his leg. Enough arguments. I'm not going to fire anyone at your will. Alvin stays with us, and you bring him up to speed. That's the end of the matter. Go and do your job." "Oh, yeah. So you're not going to take what I say seriously?" "Okay, so I'll just have to submit. like I always do." Margaret gritted her teeth and left the office. Her father's words did not reconcile her with Alvin. On the contrary, she was determined to get him out of the way at all costs. "Well, Daddy, to you, your daughter means nothing. I'll prove to you that an employee like that does more harm than good. Your Alvin will fly out like a cork, and you'll be forced to recognize my rightness." Angrily thought the girl, having decided to get Alvin out of the firm by her own efforts. Now she wanted not only to get rid of the man she disliked, but also to prove to her father that she was right. "Alvin may be a good specialist, but he brings only misfortune to me, and I am sure he will bring a lot of trouble to the whole firm, so my father will have to thank me for getting rid of Alvin," she thought stubbornly, and she began to set up the one she considered an enemy in a sneaky way, without giving any sign of doing so. But in her perversion of the setup, she did not notice that she herself had made a mistake. Through Margaret's fault, a very important contract for the firm was disrupted. However, even this, the girl considered it a chance to realize her devious plans, because she and Alvin worked together. However, she could not blame the young man directly, so they had to answer to their father together. Kevin was furious. After all, this contract was vital. How could you, two such promising professionals, let's say that one of them missed it, but the other could have warned, could have eventually informed me of the impending mistake. Or was it a provocation? Why are you silent? I would like to hear who is to blame for what happened. Margaret had already taken the air in her chest to blame Alvin. She would be ashamed to lie, but it was no easier to bear her father's anger. Before she could speak, however, the young man spoke up. "I'm sorry, Kevin. It must have been my fault. Margaret tried to warn me, but I didn't listen. I decided that my decision was more correct. Yes, it was my fault that the contract fell through. I am prepared to suffer any punishment." His speech was a complete surprise to the girl, but she did not object. She just did not dare. The father continued his angry speech. "Punishments, forfeit your bonus, postpone your vacation to wintertime? No, I'm sorry, Alvin. I can't tolerate people in my firm who are capable of such mistakes." Alvin was fired. Margaret got off with a severe reprimand and a guilty conscience. She didn't say anything that day. She didn't have the guts. She drove home in a terrible mood, and as she passed the place where she had first met Alvin, that is, where he himself had met her automobile, the girl stopped, dropped her head on her hands folded on the steering wheel. Again it was her fault a man was hurt. He took her guilt upon himself, saved her from her father's wrath, perhaps from being fired or demoted, neither of which is such a terrible misfortune. And Alvin himself, of course, will not be unemployed for long, but how will she, Margaret, will look in his eyes? Who would she be in the memory of this man who had been so noble and unselfish? It would be better if he remembered her as a silly girl who could not kill a chicken, and now he would remember her as a mean and cowardly woman who, afraid of her father, could frame anyone. And most importantly, she would be safe. Margaret raised her head and only then realized that her face was flooded with tears. She wiped her eyes resolutely, angry with herself now. She had done a mean thing, but it was in her power to make it right. Tonight she would tell her father, find Alvin, and apologize to him. Yeah, it'll be too late, but what can you do? I can't turn back the clock. I'll quit if I have to. Margaret drove home, determined to right her wrong. You know, Papa, I must confess to you that I've done something very, very wrong again. She told her father at home. That mistake that Alvin confessed was mine. He warned me, but I didn't pay attention. So it was me who should have been fired, not him. So you knew that, but you kept your mouth shut in my office? Yeah, I didn't do it because I was afraid you'd punish me in some way, but because I was against Alvin from the start. You remember that? Don't ask me why. It's more serious than I said. And at the time, I thought I had a chance to get rid of him. And now you know how I feel. Yeah. And I suspected something like that from the beginning, but it's not like Alvin could be that stupid. Yeah, he confessed and you didn't say anything. I thought he was telling the truth. Does that make you feel different now? I wonder how I'm supposed to feel after what happened. I want to get Alvin's address and apologize to him. I hope you'll change your mind, keep him at the firm, and I'll quit if I have to. I'll apologize, of course, but I don't know what his decision will be. I don't know what yours will be either. Will you quit? Would that change anything? How could you not say anything? Why did you want him to leave the firm so badly? Why do you keep putting me in situations where I feel most helpless? Why helpless? Besides, it's not your fault. You just didn't know. And the reason for my attitude towards Alvin? I'm sorry, but that's something I can only tell him. Yes, it's hard to suspect your daughter of doing something like that, even if you know her like the back of your hand. Alvin's address, I don't know how I know it, but you can ask Human Resources. His firing order hasn't been signed yet. And if you, today, go and explain everything with him, he can come back tomorrow and continue working. If, of course, he wants to work in such a firm, where people set each other up without a wince. You're right, of course, and he'll be right not to come back to the firm. Give me the phone number of the head of HR. At least she probably has the addresses of all the employees on her computer. Alvin's address and phone number were easily recognized. Margaret called him immediately. Alvin, it's me. Are you home right now? I want to come over and talk to you. About what, Margaret? I doubt we have anything to talk about. Coldly, the young man replied, I don't doubt it. You taught me a lot of things in the village, but the main lesson I learned is here. That's what I want to talk to you about. I hope you won't refuse me. Can I come over? I don't know. If you want to come over. I'm not going anywhere myself. I'm very tired. Margaret started to get ready for Alvin. I don't know what you'll say to him, and will he want to listen to you? Kevin doubted. But he didn't say no, he said come, so I'll go. Determinedly, the girl said. She didn't know what she was going to say or where this conversation would lead, but she couldn't go. She made no plans even on the way. Although the way to the young man's house was not so close. When she arrived, she rang the doorbell, and as soon as Alvin opened it, she said quickly, I came to apologize and thank you. To be honest, I didn't expect you to be so honorable. Just take all the blame and accept the dismissal. There's nothing wrong with quitting. I'll get a job anyway, but it's the fact that I agreed to it. You know, Margaret, I saw that you didn't like me working at your firm and suspected that you would make me quit someday anyway. Well, what can I do, so I'll leave. There's nothing wrong with that. Not to you, but it is to me. I don't want you to quit. I told my father everything, and he's agreed to let you come to work tomorrow. No one knows about the conversation that took place in his office. There's no order to fire you. You'll just come in and work as before. Please don't go. I'm begging you. It's very important to me that you stay. You see, I don't want to stay if you're not there. Margaret held back her tears. She didn't want to burst into tears. It would look like she was begging for something, and she wasn't going to ask him for anything. She really wanted Alvin to stay, and she wanted to explain the reason for that, but he was the first to speak frankly. I'm not really saying no. All right, I'll stay, but you know, Margaret, it's not even because working at your father's firm is so important to me. I just want to see you every day, you know? Alvin didn't expect those words to come out of his mouth. He would never have dared to confess his feelings to Margaret in another situation, but now it came out of his own mouth, and his hands came to rest on the girl's shoulders. Suddenly, she buried her face in his shoulder. "You know, Alvin." Muffled, she said, "I don't know whether you're confessing your love or just saying that, but I have to tell you, to confess that I didn't want to fire you because you didn't suit me, but because I didn't think I'd ever confess what you meant to me. Ever since that summer in the village, I've felt that you're not a stranger to me. I mean, you know. But I was afraid I didn't mean anything to you, so I did this. I'll tell you what I was really afraid of. I thought you might start courting some other girl in front of me, and I couldn't take it. Well, I've confessed everything, and now you can do what you want. You can quit, you can laugh and kick me out. I'm not gonna quit, and I never expected you to admit that. But since you said it, yes, I loved you back in the village, and now. I was afraid every day that someone would say, 'Let's buy a present. Margaret's getting married.' Why didn't you say anything?" Margaret exclaimed, "In the village and now, didn't you feel that we were not strangers? I was afraid we were not a couple, afraid of rejection, afraid of ridicule. Of course, there was no mockery. The next day, Alvin returned to the firm as if nothing had happened. A short time later, there was talk of Margaret and Alvin's imminent marriage. Kevin was pleased with his daughter's decision. "Congratulations, Margaret. You've made the right choice. To tell you the truth, if it had started then, in the village or even now, before your fatal mistake, I probably would have been against it, suspecting Alvin of some kind of calculation. But now I see clearly that it is you he loves and not the position which, by means of kinship with me, he can obtain. I see now that it is this man who can make you happy," he said to his daughter, blessing the forthcoming marriage.
Subscribe and click the bell. Molly admired her reflection in the mirror. A tall, slender woman with luxurious hair. She hardly recognized herself. The black dress of classic style shone with a steely sheen, which only emphasized the advantages of her figure even more. Suddenly, a suspicious rustle was heard from behind, followed by a whisper from Nancy's eldest daughter. "She's so beautiful, like a cartoon queen." The younger Vanessa said affirmatively, "Aha." The girls thought their mother couldn't see them, but the mirror revealed their secret agenda. Peeping is not good. Molly turned around abruptly. The daughters squealed with delight. "Mommy, we were trying to be quiet. We just really want to see it all too." Vanessa messed up her nose, so you can hear it from 3 kilometers away. Molly grabbed the girls in an armful and kissed each one on the sun-scented top of her head. Wendy Vanessa, the message had nothing to do with it because the mirror gave you away. The older girl walked over and immediately clapped her hands together. "Oh, you can see everything. And we thought you wouldn't notice us." Suddenly, the little girl's voice faded. "Daddy's coming." After the sisters had secretly entered the parents' bedroom, the door remained open, so no one noticed the appearance of the head of the family. Stephen tried to give his voice a cheerful note, but his face expressed dissatisfaction. "Who's distracting our mom? Come on, shoo kittens to your room." The girls looked at each other and ran out of the bedroom. Stephen didn't even throw them a funny joke, which sometimes happened when he was in good spirits. Today the man had been depressed since morning, so even his daughters were irritating him. Molly, too, was all tense, awaiting her husband's verdict. Stephen took a few steps back and looked at his wife for a minute. It was so unbearable that the woman asked in a half-whisper, "What do you think?" "Nothing good. Couldn't you have bought something more decent with the money I gave you?" "Stephen, the only thing I could have bought with that money was a warm bathrobe. My parents gave it to me. I wonder why I'm the last to know. I told you to keep me in the loop, including financially. But it was my parents who decided to help me out. It doesn't matter. You don't live on an island where you could do whatever you wanted. But you have a family. So you have responsibilities and duties. The high spirits evaporated immediately. Molly cast a fleeting glance in the mirror and saw a dim-eyed woman emerge. Stephen noticed the movement. Look at yourself without averting your gaze. Now you understand why I always attend important events. You're in that shabby outfit you spent mad money on. You look like everything. I won't say the number of years out loud. Tears, resentment appeared in the woman's eyes. Stephen, why are you making a spectacle of yourself here right now? You should have gone to your own corporate party. If you're embarrassed of me, I didn't stuff myself into the company. The man jumped up to his wife and looked into her face. You're still raising your voice. You should be dusting me off. I provide for you all. I feed you. I bought this apartment too, by the way. I'm in terrible debt. And all for what? To make my wife turn her nose up at me. Stephen, why did you grab Molly's makeup and throw it all over the dressing table? That was my money too. So you'd better shut up. He headed for the door, but then he came back. I'll give you half an hour to pack. Sam and his wife will pick us up. As for your reproach, I'm really ashamed of your appearance. Can't you see you look like a tortured codfish? I'd love to go to the party alone, but the chief has ordered all the staff to come with their soulmates. So I'm at your mercy, so you can consider my situation hopeless, and pouring his discontent on the unfortunate woman. Stephen already said more calmly, Pays and really very unfortunate choice, but it's too late to change anything. And the hair, I think it's too inappropriate for your age. What's with all these frivolous aunts? I hope my girl's not in that condition. You'll see for yourself. I've prepared everything as usual. The husband went to tidy up his status persona. Molly remained standing in front of the mirror, and she wanted more than anything to tear off her dress and fall into the cushions and let her tears flow. But there was some truth in their reproach to Stephen. She was indeed entirely dependent on him. After all, even for the necessary feminine trifles, her husband allocated her monthly funds. And after every trip to the store, she presented him with receipts. And this had been going on for almost 10 years. From behind again, there were light footsteps. The daughters nestled against their mother, as if they wanted to comfort her. And the eldest, Nancy, whispered, Mommy, and trust Daddy. You are the most beautiful in the whole world, and he scolds you on purpose because he is afraid. What is he afraid of? Don't you understand? What if while Daddy's at work, that Tsarevich comes and takes you away with him? It happened. Remember in that story you read to us, Vanessa, the other day? Molly laughed. Well, I'm not Sleeping Beauty. And there are no princes and princesses among my acquaintances. Anyway, go to your room. Daddy's gonna come in and swear at us again. This threat was followed by an immediate reaction. The girls flew out of the room with cosmic speed. Left alone, Molly corrected her makeup. She once again critically examined herself in the mirror. What a mess of hair on her head. In a minute, the design was evil. There was no trace of it. The woman went through her long hair and then invented Strand's beautiful herringbone and laid the braid on the side. It really did look better that way. For the umpteenth time in just one day, the woman caught herself thinking that agreeing with her husband in everything had become a tradition for her. She had grown accustomed to obediently following his orders, accustomed to his perpetual displeasure. It had gotten to the point where she was afraid to move at night to avoid waking Stephen. But the worst was that her husband takes such servile behavior as a norm. And not so long ago, things had been different. How could she not have noticed her transformation into a slave? This was not the first time Molly had faced this question. After all, 10 years in the scale of one human life is a long time. But it so happened that Stephen imperceptibly became for her not only the main person, but also the ruler of her fate. Unfortunately, she realized it too late, and now she has to bear all the insults and humiliations without complaint. But all this she is ready to endure only because there is a hope that one day she will see again that kind Stephen, who for her was from childhood the standard of a real man. Molly was too young to remember the details of their first meeting, But Jenna loved to recount how her 3-year-old daughter had declared to the world when a new boy was brought into their group, "This is my friend," to affirm that right. The little girl squeezed the baby's palm tightly and led him to the part of the room where the play corner was. The pupils of the younger group fell silent, and the adult witnesses of this touching scene smiled reproachfully. But no one objected to this distribution of roles. Then Molly was not distinguished by a soft character, and on any aggression on the part of her peers responded sharply. And her methods of fighting with opponents allowed the use of brute physical force. Therefore, Jenna often had to blush from the unworthy behavior of a small bandit. Christopher, learning about the mischief of his heiress, proudly declared Arvane. "Therefore, we have no weaklings in the family." Jenna always said to such praise, "Next time you'll go after your daughter. I can't be the only one to take the blame for her bad upbringing." The man sincerely resented who dared to say such a thing, that fool. "That's what you're going to tell the teacher too, because she thinks you and I are failing in our parental duties." Christopher rushed in with an open mind to stand up for justice, but his optimism didn't last long. Within a week, his righteous fervor waned, and the loving father found any excuse not to cross the threshold of the kindergarten. True, since the advent of mentees in the face of fat Stephen, Molly slightly changed for the better. The same teacher who not so long ago criticized the girl's behavior, now at every turn praised her Molly a real angel. Stephen is clumsy, and not everything works out for the kid, and she tries to help him in everything. And such tutelage, it pays off. The boy tries to imitate his girlfriend, Molly, and in his school years was for Stephen either a beacon or a guiding star. If he did something on his own, he always looked back at the bullet. Her support for the boy was as necessary as air, but Stephen himself also tried to respond in kind. And even in the 3rd grade, the guy showed his fighting character when he was not afraid of the guys who were 2 years older. 5th graders decided to shake their younger counterparts, and they chose girls as their victims. Stephen stumbled upon the humiliating scene quite by accident. 3 girls from the class, surrounded by immature runabouts, were desperately crying. "Boys, we really don't have any money. We spent it all in the cafeteria." One of the bigger boys spit through his teeth. "What if we shook you like Pinocchio?" The girls cried even louder. But these tears are even bigger. Would the extortionists be aroused? One of them grabbed the smallest girl by the hood of her jacket. Stephen, without thinking of the consequences, grabbed some stick, and with it went to ram the enemy with a shout of freaks. Let the girls go. The hooligans clearly did not expect such a turn of events and rushed away. Saved classmates then told everyone about the courage of Stephen, and the young hero was embarrassed by his sudden popularity. True, his moment of fame was short. When the novice bandits realized that screwed up in front of the 3rd grade, they decided to take cruel revenge on him. And the next day, after the landmark rescue of girls under the eye of yesterday's hero painted a huge black eye, the rescued girls sighed and rolled their eyes prettily. "Stephen, you got it for us too. Now you can cheat off me at home for the whole quarter." In math, the 2nd classmate wanted to drag him into a sick dance class, but Stephen delicately refused all kinds of help and proudly said bruises are nothing. Scars adorn the face of a real man. But Stephen's popularity did not endear him to Molly. When classmates started circling him like flies, she seriously warned them. "He's my friend. We've been friends since kindergarten. And just because Stephen protected you doesn't mean he's going to hang out with you." The classmates didn't have to repeat themselves twice, and they quickly refocused their attention on another subject. But Stephen had already gotten a taste of popularity, and he was angered by Molly's interference. "Why are you meddling where you're not wanted? Maybe I don't want to be friends with you anymore." That statement annoyed him, but it didn't frighten Molly. The girl stopped paying attention to Stephen, and access to her notebook was closed to him. Of course, he could have moved to another desk, and many girls would have been happy to have such a neighbor. But something told him he shouldn't make it public. The relationship with Molly was ruined. The tense situation resolved itself. All the holidays at school were celebrated brightly, but with the involvement of their own talents. When the program of the Defender of the Fatherland Day event was drawn up, all that was left was to find worthy presenters. At the Pedagogical Council discussed various candidates, but the principal herself unexpectedly suggested that we're racking our brains here. In the third, and there's a lovely couple called Molly and Stephen. One of the teachers objected. They're very young, and that's great. Babies are always seen in a positive light, even if they make mistakes. A common cause brought the friends together again. They did an excellent job, and many said that it was the presenters who were the highlight of the concert program. Molly was in the crossfire of glances for the first time, and Stephen already knew the taste of fame. Then, after the concert, he suddenly realized that Molly could be the bridge from which he could jump more than once. This discovery both shocked and pleased the ambitious boy. He held out his hand to his girlfriend. "Molly, I'm sorry, I was wrong. I said some nonsense to you." The girl was embarrassed. She didn't expect Stephen to say such things. It was out of character. "Come on. Forget it, Stephen. I'm not angry." She smiled openly and immediately realized how much she missed their companionship. Friendship forever, then, Molly laughed. It overflowed her soul with joy, and Stephen sang out, "The friendship is strong. It won't break." A friend in a thin voice picked up, "Won't split the rains and the South." They sang the popular children's song selflessly, holding hands and looking into each other's eyes. And at that moment, they truly believed that nothing and no one could break their friendship, that the world seems very different when you're young. It's a well-known fact. Molly and Stephen were convinced that they should only step on the broad road of adult life, and they will walk on it easily and confidently. Although both of them did not have excellent diplomas, their chances of getting into a good university were high. At that time, there was a demand for lawyers and economists in the country, and the couple decided to apply directly to the capital's university. Molly had doubts at the last moment. Aren't we being overconfident? After all, this is not something, but a very serious institution. Courage beats cities. Remember that proverb. The girl realized that Stephen was encouraging them. Somewhere in the back of her mind, she agreed with him. But what doubt was growing? "I remember, but I feel uneasy. What's with all this downward spiral?" "Molly, I don't recognize you. You've always been brave. That was before. It's all the same at your home school, but here it's Moscow. Maybe you and I can find something a little more modest. There are plenty of good schools all over the country." Stephen became serious at once. "I'll try to prove to you the evil truth of life on my fingers. Indeed, there are many institutes in our beautiful country, but only the capital's universities have an impeccable reputation. Even if your diploma is full of C's with a few B's, the mere fact of graduating in Moscow will be a huge advantage when applying for your first job. I probably don't need to tell you that career growth depends directly on where you start." Molly looked at the guy as if she was seeing him for the first time. They had talked so much, knew so much about each other. Molly understood that Stephen wanted to achieve something, but for him to have such emphatic, pragmatic thoughts, she had no idea. He even seemed like a distant stranger to her now. "Stephen, are you thinking so strangely? I even get the impression you're repeating someone else's words. I can't deny it. I have my moments. But I don't see anything wrong with it. Look at you and me. I mean, we both come from average families. Our parents are positive people, real hard workers. How is that a bad thing? My dad has honorary degrees all over his wall. So what? Where do we put these props? What use is it? Stephen, are you talking crazy shit right now? It seems so to you, because you were brought up on outdated stereotypes. But life changes, and today we have different priorities. Because enthusiasm alone won't get you far. My father realized that a long time ago, but he didn't have time to readjust. He laid it out for me. The rules of life should be initially, as the great poet said, from the young nails to aim at achieving the main goal. Of course, at first it may seem unattainable, but if you set the right accents, Everything will work out. Did you surprise me? I've never looked that far. I always thought it was like a computer game. You had to go from one level to the next. In principle, you have a good point. But the main goal should be immediately using your comparison as a target. Stephen looked at her with his eyes. So Molly understood, and her arguments will not be heard, but still tried. Wait, Stephen, what if we don't get in? And I'm definitely getting in, and I'm sure of it. If I can't get in on a budget, I'll study for a fee. But that's a lot of money. My parents don't have that kind of money. She didn't understand how Stephen could say such a thing, as if in 1 second she became a stranger and an outsider to him. Oh, come on, was it just her imagination, or did she misunderstand? Turns out she got it right. I can't help you there. As they say, to each his own. By the time she graduated high school, Stephen's selfishness was evident even in the smallest things. One day, Jenna gently hinted this fact to her daughter. Molly, I don't like to meddle in other people's affairs, but I don't like the way Stephen is using you. Don't you see that? Mom, it's just your imagination. We're on good terms. He helps me with a lot of things too. I don't notice it. Well, God be with you. The boss is the boss. They left Solnitnogorsk together, as they should. In such cases, the parents gave the admonition, having broken free chicks, and believed that at the first time to conquer not only the capital, but the whole world. But Molly flew straight through. She didn't have enough points to get on the budget. But Stephen rejoiced because he passed the competition. Molly cried all day with resentment, but she didn't want to go back to her small town. A girl they shared a dorm with gave her advice. A lot of people fail after the first time. That's normal. The main thing now is not to miss a year. You can find out where you're short, or learn some other useful profession. This option interested Molly, and she went with her neighbor to look for an educational institution. For a whole day, they passed more than a dozen colleges and schools, but everything was already packed to the brim. And only in one college of food industry there were a few free places. But the girls, tired of searching, were satisfied with the result. Molly thought that Stephen would be pleased when he found out that she would still study in the capital. The girl decided to tell him this happy news over the phone. But her friend's reply was a shock. You realize that college is a judgment. Now everyone will look at you as incomplete. I wish you'd come home. You could try again next year. Molly tried to change her friend's mind, but he firmly believed he was right. The girl called him several times, hoping for a meeting. But Stephen each time found 100 excuses to keep the date from happening. Evelyn, the girl they went to college with, noticed. I think your date is embarrassed of you. He's my friend. We didn't have any of that, and it's too bad. No matter what anyone says, but guys like consistency. Yeah, they might have an affair with your girlfriend on the side. But God forbid they get something they used to think was theirs stolen from under their noses. What are you implying? I'm not implying anything. I'm telling you to make your Stephen worry. You're an attractive girl, and you can have suitors. Evelyn, do you think it'll work? Are you sure your friend's gonna come running? How do I put this plan into action? It's very simple. Evelyn's method was simple, but most importantly, it required nothing. The executor was also quickly found. Molly was being courted by a guy who was nearing the end of his studies. John was a fan of the Bavarian business and dreamed of having his own restaurant. He was jokingly called the Bavarian Book in college because he knew 1,000 recipes and fascinatingly told about the national peculiarities of the cuisines of different countries of the world. John invited Molly to a cafe a couple of times, and she agreed to keep him company out of boredom. On the advice of a neighbor, the girl began to give the guy signs of attention, and soon he was following her like a thread behind a needle. For the first time holiday of spring, Molly came to visit her parents with John. The parents liked the young man immediately. Jenna he impressed with his knowledge of cooking. The mother whispered enthusiastically to her daughter so that the guest would not hear. Molly, this guy is a real treasure. He's a treasure. Make sure you don't let him get away so you can bite your elbows later. Mommy John is just a good friend of mine. What is it with you guys? Making plans for the future. There's nothing wrong with that, because all parents worry about their kids and wish them well. You already had a best friend, but he hasn't been around lately. He's probably embarrassed to be friends with a girl who's studying to be a chef. I mean, bankers rule the roost these days. Jenna talked about Stephen without mentioning his name, which indicated her strong resentment toward her daughter's former classmate. Molly marveled at how good a judge of character her mother was. But in remembrance of an old friendship, she still stood up for the one she was constantly thinking about. Mom, you're the one who says you can't judge a person indiscriminately. Stephen has a goal, and he's on his way to it at the moment. Freshman year in any school is the most difficult period. I admit that Eve and I have problems, even though I'm in college. But in the summer, if everything works out well, I will go back to university. That's the right decision. Here I support you in everything. The holidays flew by like a minute, and the guests had to return to the capital. But Evelyn's plan worked 100%. Literally, the next evening after returning to the capital, there was a knock on the room where Molly lived with her friend. When the girl opened the door, she was stunned with surprise. In front of her, with a bewildered smile, stood Stephen. "Hello, boy." It is not known from what secret place extracted a huge bouquet of flowers. "I'm sorry I'm late, but I wish you a happy spring festival. I couldn't make it earlier. You probably weren't expecting me." "You guessed. I haven't been expecting you for a long time. But what's an old friend for when there are so many suitors around? I heard you got a boyfriend. You guys are serious." Molly's heart was ringing with joy. She had no idea Evelyn's plans would bear fruit so quickly. "Since when did you become interested in my life?" "Molly, can I come in?" It's awkward to talk in the doorway. Yeah, sure. I'm sorry, but your visit is so unexpected that I'm confused about an old friendship. I mean, you're the one who stopped returning my calls. And since I'm not a vowed nun, I have every right to date. Yeah, of course, it's my fault. But you do realize that the life of a student. The girl interrupted the guest. "Stephen, I understand it's hard for you. You sleep 3 hours a night. You have a goal, but you forgot one little thing. I'm a student too. Yes, the profession I'm learning isn't that prestigious. But if there are no cooks, bankers, and other professions will have a hard time." The young man looked at Molly as if he were seeing her for the first time. The girl noticed how he blushed to the roots of his hair. By this sign, she realized that her suspicions were not groundless, and Stephen was really shy of her. Society. But the fear of losing such a convenient and fail-safe defense still overpowered ambition. But soon there was another reason that made Stephen protect his friend from outside influence. The guy was pleasantly surprised to learn that in a few months Molly had learned to cook. One day the girl and her friend asked to visit Stephen. He agreed, but warned, "You just don't fall." But we have everything Spartan. Evelyn did not hold back and barely crossed the threshold of the room. "This is not a room to live in. It's a real den. Okay. Outsiders, please leave. Molly and I will try to make this place look a little more decent." It wasn't 2 o'clock before the occupants, Kingerly, looking around, couldn't believe they'd gotten into their room. But even more, the boys were surprised when the temporary hostesses invited them to the table, in the center of which a large pot shone with pristine brilliance. The reaction from the hungry students pleased Evelyn immensely. It seemed to her that another minute's delay, and the boys would go into shock from the increased secretion of saliva. "From what was in your refrigerator, we could only boil borscht. So, dear hosts, don't be sorry for the modest table," but 4 sturdy guys were not up to etiquette, and they greedily pounced on the food. However, the excellent appetite did not prevent them from periodically complimenting the girls on the delicious food as if they were at home. "It's been a long time since I had such a hearty lunch. Today we have a real belly feast." The girls were satisfied with the result of the action, and the guys were inviting them to visit. "Girls, your borscht is like the elixir of life. Come again next time, we will buy more food." Maybe you can make us some cutlets." Evelyn winked. "But it's true what they say that the shortest way to a man's heart is through his stomach." Today I was convinced of that. Molly was absorbed in her own thoughts and said nothing. Evelyn tugged her friend by the arm. "Molly, wake up. Listen, what do you think? Robert?" "Robert who?" "Well, the skinny, tall one. And the one with the glasses, he's not bad looking." "No, he seemed nice." The girlfriend's romance with the future banker spun so fast that in the summer the couple got married. The newlyweds rented an apartment, and Molly was left alone in the dormitory. But this loneliness was not long. In the fall, she entered the university on a correspondence course. Stephen also agreed that combining study and work is the best option for a couple who are going to become a family in the near future. Only in this generally happy picture there was no place for John. The guy saw from afar, shining at Molly in the company of a childhood friend, and understood everything without words. No, he did not hold a grudge against the girl, whom he really liked very much. But realizing that his chances were practically zero, he silently retreated. Then he could not suspect that many years would pass, and he would play a major role in Molly's destiny. Jenna was unpleasantly surprised by her daughter's decision to marry her childhood friend. But most of all, the woman was worried about John, whom she liked very much. "Molly, have you thought this through? Stephen, he's a selfish bastard. You've had your share of grief with him. Mom, you're being weird instead of wishing us happiness. You make terrible predictions." Christopher did not interfere, but from his look it was easy to guess that he was not excited about the upcoming wedding either. Not until before the celebration itself. He still decided to talk to Molly. "Daughter, I just want to say don't confuse childhood friendship with love. Are you sure Stephen feels that way about you?" "Of course he does, or he wouldn't have proposed to me." But as the emotions subsided after the wedding, Evelyn began to ask herself that question more and more often. All the burdens of family life she had to pull on herself. Even more complicated life. Studies. Stephen advised his young wife to quit Molly University. "Why bother with your brain? You have a good profession. Very useful for the family, by the way. I love your borscht and everything you make." "Stephen, you're the one who told me to go for it." "That's right. But I think right now your only priority is our family. I want my home to be warm and cozy and filled with children's laughter. And what will we live on? Let now our parents help us a lot, but they're not going to be pulling their weight forever. I'm not gonna put that kind of weight on their shoulders. I've only got 2 years of school left. Then I promise that I will do everything I can to provide for my family." Molly listened to her husband's optimistic plans and suddenly asked Stephen, "Tell me honestly, why did you marry me?" This conversation took place during breakfast, and the man almost choked on a sausage sandwich with cheese. "Molly, is it permissible to ask stupid questions while eating?" "Well, most women suffer from this bad habit. But I'll tell you the answer to that. I've never even considered another candidate for wife. You and I know each other well, which is good for our marriage. Then you're a great hostess and a great cook. In short, I have complete confidence in you." "Stephen, what about love? Did you marry me for pragmatic reasons?" Molly was astonished by her husband's revelations. She had expected to hear from him quite different words, but he did not think it necessary to say them, even for the sake of propriety. The young woman felt humiliated and wanted to tell her husband everything. But Stephen caught her mood and beat her to it. "Love is a beautiful word, of course, and I understand perfectly well what a storm is brewing in your sensitive heart. But life is hard, and you can't get very far on love alone. For me, it's more important the material side and everyday life. And lyrics are a secondary matter. So you didn't marry me for love, you married me for convenience." Stephen looked at his wife as one looks at a hopelessly ill person. "Yes. What's wrong with that? I'm comfortable with you, and I plan to live my whole life that way. And thanks for the delicious breakfast." The husband still hadn't answered the big question. But Molly didn't dare to ask it anymore because she knew the answer. That day she realized how right her mother was. Everything inside her protested, and the voice of reason shouted, "Get away from him now, or it will be too late later. Where's your pride, Molly?" The young woman did not heed the call and stayed. It was her first sacrifice, made on the altar of, she thought, of marital happiness. Stephen was a subtle psychologist and realized at once that he had won his first victory. Every day thereafter, he methodically suppressed in his wife her own. His dictate was well thought out and from the outside resembled the care of a beloved woman. Another advantageous quality was possessed by Stephen. He always acted proactively, not giving his wife a chance to recollect. Just a year of living together, Molly turned into a mountain maid of her husband. She fulfilled his every whim at the first request. When Stephen found out that they were having a child, he began to control her every move. Therefore, Molly had to leave the university after 2 years of study. Subsequently, she left in work, which gave her at least a small opportunity to realize herself. The only consolation for the young woman were children. A year and a half after the birth of Nancy, Molly again became pregnant. This period was the happiest in her life because Stephen loosened control and she could afford small weaknesses. Her husband simply adored his daughters and made plans for the future. "We're not gonna stop there. You owe me another son." Evelyn was trying to make a joke. "Stephen, come down to earth. We're already cramped in this rented apartment. Are you planning on having a third child? Don't worry, wife. Our living conditions will improve very soon." Molly knew that her husband was not used to throwing words into the wind and waited patiently. She did not pester him with questions because for several years of life together learned that unnecessary curiosity only makes her husband angry, and she didn't want to cause a scandal. One day her husband came home from work in a high spirits. He picked up in his arms, ran up to the neck of his eldest daughter. "Well, my princesses will soon cross. We will have a big apartment in a new neighborhood." Molly was wary. "Stephen, but where did we get that kind of money? Have you forgotten where your husband works?" "That's right, at the bank. I've already taken out a soft loan." "Then we don't have any maternity capital. I even forgot about it. You should have. We could use the extra money now. By the way, I've already paid the deposit and all the necessary documents. I don't suppose you'd mind if I took care of it." "Sure, Stephen. I don't know anything about legal matters anyway. Besides, you're doing this for the best interests of our family." "Exactly. And I'm glad you realize that. Hopefully, happy news. You're gonna feed me tonight." The woman shook her hands. "I'm sorry, darling. It's really great news. I'd forgotten all about it. I've had everything ready for a long time. And the first, and the second. Tonight, I've decided to make chicken vine." Stephen kissed his wife in the heat of the moment. "And if you knew how much I appreciate moments like that. I'm Stephen too, and I wish there were more of them." But her husband didn't hear her. He went to the bathroom to wash his hands, from where his joyful voice came. "Yes, I have more good news. I've been offered a position as head of security. Of course, I will have to go through some procedures, as it is a very responsible position." Molly handed her husband a clean towel. "You'll do great. It's a really unusual day today. I even feel like the sun is shining brighter. All happy people feel that way. And it's very nice to see you happy." Stephen drew his wife to him and kissed her soundly. And it was a very different kiss from the one he had hastily bestowed on the woman as she ran off to work. It was a special time for the couple. Moving into a new apartment had brought them together, and everyone in the family was fully engaged in getting on with their lives. While Stephen disappeared at work, Molly was engaged in minor repairs to help the young family decided and parents. Even Nancy Vanessa tried to contribute to the common cause, but it was not always successful. When the renovations were finished, Jenna wanted to have a heart-to-heart talk with her daughter. "Wendy, are you happy? Or are you trying to be? Mommy, have I ever lied to you? Why are you asking me? You look tired. It's been a long time since we've seen each other. You've changed a lot. Have I aged that much? I mean, it's become dull, and you look confused, and you're always eyeliner, as if you're afraid I'll read something in them. Molly sat down on the chair opposite her mother. Her condition was not hard to guess from the way she nervously rubbed the limp tablecloth on the table. Mom, even if I'm not completely happy, but only trying to portray it, there's nothing I can do about it. Yes, I often catch myself thinking that I dreamed of a different life. Yes, I feel like a bird in a cage all the time, and I'm aching to break free. But you know I can't afford it. I have kids, and they need a father. Stephen loves girls. They're his. Jenna cried softly. Daughter, what kind of life have you condemned yourself to? I mean, it could have been so different. What I can't understand is what happened to your character. You were so stubborn in your childhood and in your youth. Mom grinned bitterly. Do you know the answers to these questions yourself? Yes, it's my own fault for letting myself dissolve into my husband. All that was left of me was a shadow. I sacrificed everything else on the altar of marital happiness. I may have used a strong comparison, but it's the one that best fits the situation. I don't know what to advise you, but remember that you have family who will always help you. Thanks, Mom. But I still have faith that Stephen and I will work things out. Jenna didn't say anything. She felt in her heart that in this way her daughter was trying to hold on to the last hope that was about to disappear forever, like a star in the morning sky. If the first years of married life, Stephen still sometimes hears the voice of conscience. After moving into the new apartment, he stopped listening to it. He felt he was the master of his life, and anyone who didn't agree with this division of roles, he put a lot of pressure on. Of course, it was Molly who got the brunt of it, although the woman had recently lost all ability to resist. But strangely enough, it was this blind submission that threw the man off balance, and he had to make a lot of effort not to spill his irritation in public on his wife during the corporate party. When they arrived at the restaurant, where the event was held on the occasion of the bank's anniversary, the party was already in full swing. After a short introduction of the guests, the chief took Stephen aside. Your wife is a real beauty. Women in general are the jewelry of our lives. That's why they need to be treated with care. Molly felt awkward surrounded by strangers, but she was not bored alone for long. Suddenly, a familiar voice sounded nearby. What a surprise. How nice to see you here. Molly. The woman hardly recognized in the young, respectable man Robert, that longtime student who had won the heart of her dorm mate. I didn't expect to see you here either. Stephen didn't tell me you two were working together. You're not gonna believe this, but I'm just a guest at this party. I work for a company that works closely with the bank. What you don't know, Molly, is that your husband was the lucky ticket. Everyone else in our company has a more modest life, though none of us have any reason to complain. Wait a minute. Robert, why are you alone? Where? Evelyn? My wife's like the Flying Dutchman. You've probably heard of it. Evelyn appears like a mirage, then disappears. She's currently in Italy. You may not know that my wife owns her own restaurant, but that's not enough. She's got her sights set on a whole chain. Molly felt a painful tingle under her heart. She wanted to ask Robert something else, but Stephen returned. He nodded casually to a former classmate. Hi, we'll talk later. The husband wouldn't let go of Molly's hand. Stephen, where are you taking me? By the way, I'm hurting for nothing. I told you to keep a low profile. Now I'll find our place, and you'll wait patiently for me. The organizers refused from the traditional long table, and all the guests of the feast were seated at separate tables in groups of 6 people, so that the participants of the feast did not get lost. Each seat was marked coquettishly with a name tag. Stephen quickly looked up her last name. See, it says Smith. That's you and me. Sit and wait. I hope I'm allowed to go to the bathroom. Your irony is misplaced. Sit down. There's someone else I need to talk to. Her husband's behavior made the woman furious. She could barely contain her emotions. Stephen, why all the trouble? Why did you bring me here to ridicule me, so that I would be alone? as a scarecrow homogeneous not already sick of everything. The man shook his wife's hand and sang in her face. Imagine, I'd better be quiet too, otherwise I won't vouch for myself. And I'll deal with you at home. Never before had Molly seen her husband in such a state, and his last words really scared the woman. Around her there was a buzz of merriment, toasts, and congratulations, but Molly felt walled up in a vacuum pack. She raised her glass along with everyone else, but barely killed it and put it back down before eating. The woman was not moved at all. Stephen, on the other hand, was very active and hardly ever sat still. He was having a blast on the patch near the bandstand. Molly immediately noticed that a gorgeous blonde in a gorgeous dress of sky blue color did not move away from him. At first, she did not pay attention to it, but during the next dance, she noticed how the strange woman pressed against her husband. Stephen's hand at this moment was below the partner's waist. Evelyn felt so disgusted. She wanted to wash off that fake filth, but it was uncomfortable to leave the table defiantly. She turned toward the dance floor, but neither Stephen nor that lady was there anymore. Noticing that no one was paying attention to her, Molly left the table. Only an unfamiliar man who was sitting next to her, but never paid her any attention. Regretfully said, "Where are you going so soon? The evening is in full swing." "I'm sorry, but I have to go." Molly went to the ladies' room to wash her hands, but she noticed a couple in a dark corner near the closet, hiding from prying eyes. The man and woman were comfortably seated in armchairs, but from their voices she recognized Stephen immediately. "Well, bear with me a little longer. Now is not the time to change anything." A hot female whisper was heard in reply. "Stephen, I've been patient for 3 years. Believe me, I can't have that old man around me. I'm sick of hiding these secret dates and all that. Emily, believe me, I want to be with you too. I have for a long time. But if your husband knows about our meetings, I'll be buried alive." The blonde laughed softly. "She has long known everything, but always forgives me little pranks." "Why?" "Because, sorry, this is a very delicate subject. Let's better run away from here to our nest." "And I can't. I'm there now, my wife. Be patient until tomorrow." Molly did not wait for the end of the conversation, and remaining unnoticed by the lovers, returned to the hall. There was an open terrace in the restaurant, where the already quite tipsy crowd was having fun. No one paid attention to Molly, and she slipped outside. A light breeze condemned her slightly, and she began to contemplate her next steps. But all plans were too bold for her to carry out. "It's all right. I'll tell him what I think tonight." The girls were already asleep, and Molly thanked her neighbor on the playground, who sometimes kindly agreed to look after the small templates. The large cash bill quickly disappeared into the folds of the elderly lady's clothes. "Molly, thank you. By God, it costs me nothing to do you a favor. All the more pleasure to do it, because your little ones are very obedient girls. Most of today's children are spoiled, and your little girls are always obedient and polite. Very little Vanessa even calls me grandma. That's so nice." The neighbor was in the mood for a long dialogue, so the line had to say goodbye to her. "Yes, your help is invaluable, and we will definitely reach out to you and your husband, if the girls have no one to leave them with." The door from the neighboring apartment slammed shut, and the woman breathed a sigh of relief, but not before she went into the nursery to admire her sleeping daughters. How near the door sounded footsteps. Molly immediately guessed that it was her husband. The sound of his footsteps did not bode well for her. Finding his wife in the hallway, Stephen began to nag her with an angry look. Why did she leave? What's with the smugness? I was just sick of watching this feast. The hypocrisy. You could have warned me. I could have, but I didn't want to. How do you talk to me? Stephen, I'm not your subject or your serf. I'm sick of this. Stop taking over my life. Even so, the man never took his eyes off his wife, which didn't promise a quiet evening either. Since when did you become so independent? Why such a bold claim all of a sudden? From the fact that I saw with my own eyes how you and the chief's wife were treating. Oh, you also watched me well, You want the truth. There's nothing left for me to do. How to seek fulfillment of my male needs on the side, because you're like an Egyptian mummy in bed. You're useless, and your borscht and cutlets are getting on my nerves. Husband's insulting words. Melissa's slaps became on the face. A tight lump went to the throat, and Molly felt that she was choking. Stephen, you're the one. It's all coming down on me. What are you? A brainless sheep to blindly obey my every word. But I thought, and I figured it out. This conversation is over. And it's a good thing you found out today. The end of our family drama was inevitable anyway. Going to cook your borscht somewhere else, although you can stay here as a housewife. Stephen Evil laughed in her face. Think about it. I hope I've made myself clear. Yeah, except for one little thing. Did you forget about the children? The man wrinkled his nose as if he had a sudden toothache. You can stay in my apartment for the time being, but I don't have time to babysit my daughters, although I love them very much. Stephen disappeared behind the bedroom door, but reappeared a moment later. He tossed a pillow onto the living room couch. You'll sleep here tonight. This is your punishment for disobedience. That night, Molly did not close her eyes. She was scrolling through the chronicle of yesterday, by seconds remembering the beginning of their married life, but she never realized when exactly the process of destruction was started. That her softness was to blame for everything, she no longer doubted. In the morning, Stephen, as if nothing had happened, got up at the usual time, and in a cheerful voice, said to his wife, "Where's my breakfast?" Molly, too, on inertia, rushed into the kitchen. It took her only a couple minutes to prepare an omelette with cheese. Her husband loved that dish. To avoid confronting her abuser, Molly closed herself in the bathroom and turned on the shower. Through the noise of the water, she heard the front door slam on the kitchen table a piece of paper on which her husband's confident hand had written just a few words. "I'll be late. You don't have to cook dinner." Molly's eyes went black in front of her. Trying not to wake the girls, she took out her anger on anything she could get her hands on. "Thank you, Master, for not letting them. Not cooking you dinner, and it's a good thing you showed up late. You're better off with that blonde than with your wife. She doesn't stink of borscht like me." Evelyn half-whispered promises of anger accumulated over the years at milk cartons, canned crumbs, apples, and cabbage. She larded the produce with some kind of exasperation with a knife and then sent it into the trash can. The splashes flew in different directions, and soon colored, juicy rivulets flowed from the walls. Letting off steam, the woman was pleased with her work. "That's just great. Now I must do the same with everything that comes my way. As my mommy likes to say, it's a start." Jenna understood without a word. When she saw her daughter and granddaughters at the door, Molly's eyes lit up. It was obvious from her demeanor that she was excited. "Meet the guests, of course. My precious ones come through. Jorah, look who has come to see us." Christopher kissed his daughter and granddaughters. The girls immediately began to pester their grandfather with questions. "And we'll have our own room. Grandpa, will you buy us toys? Of course, you'll have everything. At Grandma and Grandpa's house, you can even walk on your head." The girls squealed with delight and immediately began to carry out Christopher's instructions. Jenna helped her daughter unpack. "Wendy, you're all right." "Yeah, I decided to take your advice and start from scratch. You know how builders have a saying, ground zero. And in my life, it just so happens that yesterday I demolished an old building, even the foundation. Now I have to build it all over again. But I'm not afraid, even though I know it will be very difficult. And it was right to leave him. Stephen will be lost without you. Mom, he found a replacement for me a long time ago. I don't think there's another woman like you in the world. No woman would put up with an arrogant man like your Stephen. But don't worry with us. You won't be lost. And we'll help you find a job. I even have some thoughts on the subject." "That's interesting. Come on, Mommy. What are you up to?" "Remember Camille? Remember our town's first cooperator? She's in urgent need of workers. She's not doing well. She's in credit, and her bar barely generates any income. believing she's working at a loss. The next day, Molly was already on the staff of the local diner. Aunt Miranda's diner was located in the bus station. But in the town, the establishment had a bad reputation because there from early morning to evening there pushed fans of drunken drink. The landlady was delighted to see Molly. "Oh, thank you, Molly. Everyone's running away from me. I don't like the conditions. You'd think I'd be happy with these skewed faces. They come in at the crack of dawn. And they beg for a loan, and then they forget." The word hunt. The left-hand woman laid it on the line. All the nuances of working in an establishment of this type. But Molly was not frightened by the difficulties. She studied the peculiarities of the job for a few weeks, and then she told the landlady, "Why don't you sell baked goods? You could even organize a hot meal here." After all, there is such a flow of passengers at the bus station. Miranda gave the new employee a condescending look. "Do you have a Barbarossa plan?" "Of course, from the outside. Everything looks good. But what I made from the tent pies, believe me, much more than on the trade of beer drink. Look, I've done some calculations." Molly handed the landlady a notebook and sheets of paper with figures. She asked in surprise, "Are you familiar with this business?" "Not much. 2 years of college, then the same number of years at the university. I wanted to become an economist, but it didn't work out. But I still got some useful knowledge." That same evening, a satisfied Miranda beckoned Molly into the back room. "And I've been studying your checklist notes." "Why do I say that?" "Because these numbers remind me of a cipher, like in the movies about spies. Of course, I don't understand this science very well, but I trust you. I'm in a bad situation. I need to fix it now. I agree with everything. But tell me, where are we going to do all this? I mean, that's going to require additional staff and space." Molly began to explain her plan. "We're going to rent the space. Yes, it would require additional funds, but we can rent the shop by the hour at the restaurant. I've already looked into it, and it would be inexpensive. I know your difficulties, and I can take out a loan. You don't need to hire staff yet. I graduated from college, and I even have experience in the Capitol Cafe." The hostess looked at Molly like she was mesmerized. Then she wrapped her in her arms. "You're my salvation." The woman was so emotional that she couldn't hold back her tears, and I'd given up believing in goodness. But as it turns out, there are still people who are ready to give a shoulder. "Molly, God sent you to me." Although not everything went smoothly at first. The bureaucratic hurdles were particularly annoying. Molly believed in success. One evening, Christopher remarked to her mother, "I've been admiring our daughter these days." In a good way, of course. The young woman laughed. "Daddy, that word always has a good meaning. But I didn't even realize that my person could delight." Jenna supported her spouse. "And you do not laugh at your father, and I completely agree with him. Did you really become like a person after you dumped your banker? You've blossomed. You've gotten prettier. You've got a light in your eyes. Dad, you've been praising me so much right here. Aren't you afraid I'll become a know-it-all?" "No, that's not typical of you. When you were a kid, you fought for the truth, defended the weak. And it's nice to see the old Molly now. So go ahead, my daughter, and start your own business. It was an accidental conversion by my father." The phrase is firmly planted in the innovator's brain. She'd never thought of running a business on her own before. Insecurity got in the way. But the first 6 months of working at Aunt Lisa's showed that it could become quite a real challenge. Later, the owner of the place herself began to talk about it openly. "Molly, you can't go to the back of the house. I still can't believe that my granddaughter has turned into a respectable establishment." Of course, the Alkis are not happy about the changes, but their opinion is of the least interest to me. But moms with babies and old grandmothers like to shop with us. But what I like most of all is the name Aunt Miranda's Pie. Succinct and beautiful. The owner did not exaggerate Molly's merits. Indeed, without her help, it would have been impossible to do such a job in such a short time. Molly already treated the pie as her own brainchild. About the enterprising woman became known in the region, And one day, a correspondent from the newspaper came to them right in the middle of the working day. He clicked his camera a lot and asked a lot of questions. At the end of the conversation, he asked Molly, "Why don't you open your own business?" She thought for a long time and then honestly answered, "My life has changed so dramatically over the last year that I don't have time to turn over the chips. I just didn't think about this question." Just a few days later, Aunt Miranda showed up, pie in the air. "You guys, you're not gonna believe this, but I'm getting married. If anyone thinks that at my age, it is shameful to organize a personal life, I will say in all seriousness that it should be done without regard to years. I got lucky in such a big way, for the first time in my life." The staff, which were mostly women of all ages, were oohing and awing. And the cleaning lady even said in her heart, "Good people, if the cover has been stolen, then maybe I'll get some, unlike that model on the runway." The woman walked through the hall, wiggling her hips and waving a mop. Everyone laughed heartily at the colorful number of the cleaner, but it was an ostentatious laugh. "What's going to happen to us now? Miranda, if you leave us, I don't think the new owner will want to keep us. Girls, don't be harsh on these. I assure you that you will not end up on the street, because your new owner will be Molly. So please love and pity." It was so unexpected for everyone that in the spacious room there was such silence that the hum of the refrigerator seemed like the roar of an airplane. But it was Molly who was most shocked. She tried to object to the hostess, but she invited her into her office with her crowning gesture. "I was so excited to surprise you, and I think I succeeded." Molly, your jaw dropped down in a funny way when I announced my decision in front of our friendly staff. The woman was used to the fact that her hostess's vocabulary consisted mostly of phrases not used in literature. What struck her most was the tone with which she was now uttering them. Miranda's whole being and was imbued with sadness. "You wouldn't believe, Molly, how my heart is torn to pieces, for I've grown attached to this town and to my bar. Bug, I'm sorry. Pie. But I can't miss my last chance to be happy at any age. And I've met a decent man. Maybe we'll make a model family. It's a pity that my darling lives in the far north, but my son is settled there too. So if things don't work out with my new husband, I'll live out my life with Kevin. You bet, Aunt Miranda. You'll do fine. But could you sell your business profitably?" "I could, but I can't trust my business to just anyone. And you're the one person I have 200% confidence in. I will try to justify your trust, and I really hope you will visit us." It took a few days to sort out the legal details. Under the terms of the deal, Molly had to pay her former landlady an almost symbolic sum. "You've done a good deed for me, and I'd like to return the favor. After all, not everything in this world is measured in money. I really want things to get better for you." Miranda sincerely wished Molly success, and the words of this kindest woman were heard in heaven. Becoming a full-fledged owner of the pie, Evelyn began to plan the expansion of the business. Soon she bought a small restaurant, which was located near the pie shop. The more successful Molly's business went, the more friends she made. They were mostly men who were eager to win the favor of a single woman. Of course, some were annoyed by the businesswoman's success. The list of the woman's bitter enemies also included the parents of her ex-husband. When Molly disappeared with the children, Stephen believed that she would return. "Nothing will crawl to my feet and will still beg like alms that I took her back. My wife is not fit to live on her own. She can't do anything. And she has no education. She'll just get a job in a diner." These were the predictions Stephen made in the company of friends. On the occasional outing, the boss's wife, he wouldn't get involved for purely personal reasons, but Molly's place was quickly taken by a young female employee of his bank. The man kept in touch with her parents, so he was aware of the affairs of his runaway wife. When he found out she'd gotten a job at the bar, his joy knew no bounds. "I told you I wouldn't be surprised if she married a farmer or a chauffeur." But Stephen's triumph was short-lived. Molly filed for divorce and alimony. It was a twist he never expected. In a burst of emotion, he dialed his wife's number, But she abruptly cut off his stream of invective. "Stephen, now you and I are going to settle everything through the courts. Oh, I almost forgot. The apartment wasn't just bought with your money. In case you haven't forgotten, there's maternity capital. So your daughters have every right to a part of the capital's living space. I hope you won't dispute that fact." The banker was unpleasantly surprised by this news, but then he got some startling information from his parents. When he found out that Molly, in addition to the pies, bought a restaurant, he had a fit of rage. "Where'd that miserable woman get the money? She couldn't buy anything without my permission. And here's a whole restaurant. There's only one way to do it. The old way, but it works reliably, and it is necessary to break the horns of this benefactor who sponsors my wife." With this monologue, Stephen forgot that Molly is no longer legally his wife. The woman herself did not even realize what plans of revenge her ex-husband was hatching. She tried not to think of him. If the past inadvertently broke into dreams, she woke up in a cold sweat. The girls rarely remembered their father either. Nancy, the eldest, went to school, and Vanessa went to kindergarten. That year, winter started suddenly. Still in the evening it threw rain, and in the morning everything was freezing. By lunchtime, it started snowing. In a matter of hours, huge snowdrifts grew in the streets. Molly stayed late at the restaurant and hurried home. She felt uneasy for some reason. Someone invisible whispered to her that she should check the pie. To cheer herself up, the woman said out loud, "It's only 200 meters away. I'll go check it out just in case. God forbid, a short circuit or some other nonsense." Gusts of wind or steel directly in her face, and it took her half an hour to travel the short distance along the line. But barely had she reached her destination, a new surprise hit her. She saw a human figure on a bench, almost completely covered in snow. It was a man. I'd given him a bad case of the booze. My God, he's going to freeze. Is it possible to get drunk to the point of unconsciousness? She began to shake this man, who was not at all like the local lovers of strong drinks. The man was wearing an expensive coat and brand-name pairs of shoes. The odor of good perfume interrupted the unpleasant smell of booze. The man did not respond to her active actions. He only mumbled something inaudible and took a few deep breaths. Molly turned the sleeping man over facing the light and was stunned. In front of her was John, whose existence she had already completely forgotten. She began to shake her former beau with renewed vigor. "John, wake up. What brings you here?" Suddenly, he responded with a memorized tongue. "Not what, who. For your information, I took a cab because I wanted to find someone here." "Where'd you get so worked up? John, do you even recognize me?" The man stared at her face for a long time, and then straightaway unfolded. "Evelyn, I've been looking for you, but I've been very well received here." John struggled to get up from the bench and looked around in surprise. "So while I was asleep, winter began. Am I an ant or a dragonfly?" Molly laughed. "We'll figure it out later. Be thankful I found you. You'd definitely be mending on that bench before morning." Jenna was somehow not surprised to see Molly in the company of a frozen John. "Oh, what's going on? I didn't mean for this to happen." "Here, Mom, please elaborate." "Then, daughter, don't swear at me anymore. But John called me when I heard you divorced Stephen and decided to come here. Things didn't work out for him either. He'll tell you all about it later." Jenna rushed to rescue a frozen guest. Molly never ceased to be amazed at her mother's resourcefulness. It was only the next day that John was able to have a normal conversation with her. He not only froze in the street, but also felt very bad. One thing Molly realized for sure: John had simply fallen in love with this hospitable little town with equally hospitable residents. They were the ones who had gotten him so pumped up, albeit at his expense. But that didn't matter anymore. After a hot soup and a crumb of strong tea, the man was ruined for good. Molly separated him on the couch and covered herself with a plaid. Jenna sighed. "Such a good man. So unlucky in life. Mom, what's his problem? There's no way I can believe that you, having talked to him for so long, don't know anything about him." The woman waved her hand. I know, of course, but no details. John got married, started his own business, quite profitable. Some kind of restaurants or cafes. And when things got good, his wife left him. She left him without a business. Don't think he doesn't drink. It's just something came over him. But he said he's not gonna give up. Starting from scratch. That means starting from scratch. Mom, are you so worried about him? Molly, come on. You know John is a good man. And if Mom had her way. I'm not talking. How are things at work? Molly is tired, sitting down. You know, I can't say it's bad, but her mother crouched down in front of her, like something's missing, not a highlight, or I'm missing some detail that's right in front of my nose. Molly, I think you're getting too lost. In such a short time, your restaurant has become one of the best in town. Molly's got her thumbs up. Exactly, Mom, one of the best, and I want the best. Jenna smiled. I recognize my daughter, and you know what I'll tell you. If you want it, you'll get it. And I know you. Thanks, Monty. I want to go to bed early tomorrow. The chef had a grandson, so he asked me to take the day off. Okay, go to bed. Molly turned around on the doorstep. Mommy's like a girl. I must be a bad mom. The girls are fine. Don't worry. And you're a good mom. It's just hard for you all by yourself right now. And your father and I don't know anything about it to help. Wendy hugged her mother in a fit of emotion. What would I do without you? Early in the morning, she kissed the sleeping girls, ran off to the restaurant. There was a lot to do, and soon she forgot completely about everything. Stephen threw his shirt with annoyance in the face of his new pasora. I do not understand. Is it so difficult to throw the shirts, the machine, and just iron them? The girl calmly threw the shirt on the floor and continued putting on her makeup. Finally, she pulled herself away from the mirror. Probably not. Stephen was furious. Of course not. Then I don't understand why you won't do it yourself. He even choked with rage. And me. And I have to wash my own shirts. But I certainly don't. And anyway, I've been thinking I'm not happy about this. Stephen watched with huge eyes as the girl quickly threw her things into her bag and sent him an air kiss. It just couldn't be. How could it be? Somebody out there. And just walked out on him like that. No, this is all Molly's fault. She was the first one who dared to do something he didn't want her to do. Stephen struggled to find a clean shirt in the closet. He breathed out a sigh of relief. It was laid out, apparently still Molly's. And then he was so furious. He must suffer here, and he'd be ruined. The businesswoman was late. It's funny if she's an illiterate fool. This business makes money. Although his mother said she had blossomed, and the girls were well dressed, he didn't want to believe it. Somehow he was absolutely sure that if he called Molly, she would come crawling back on her knees. Except, and that wasn't the plan. She should have just had to crawl over and apologize. He would forgive, of course, but not right away. And he'd make some conditions and rules for her. Stephen straight up daydreamed about making up rules, but then shake it off. You might not even make it to work on time that way. As soon as he ran to the bank, he was called to the chief. Stephen was surprised and even grimaced. He didn't really want to talk to the man who was the husband of his former mistress, but there was nothing to be done. Stephen was still a servile man, although he had Napoleonic plans. May I? Come in, Stephen. Stephen went to the table and only now saw that at the table in the corner of the office sits Emily Berry, smiling at him like that. Stephen is even coldly offended. And she's just what she needs. They parted not very nicely, or rather, very ugly. Stephen's head was already spinning. He'd just found out that Molly had filed for divorce. And then there's Emily. So, our dream has come true. I can move in with you. Stephen dumbfounded and looked at her. Are you saying you're gonna leave your husband? Well, of course I am, honey. We've talked about it so many times. He wrinkled his nose like a toothache. It's true what they say, beauty and brains are incompatible, and you're going to work. Emily fluttered her eyelashes in surprise. Why? Why? I doubt that your money bag will give you a generous parting gift, but keeping me in my place is out of the question. Emily stared at him for a while. Then she said, "So you don't want me in your life?" "Emily, you do the math." But Emily was already in a tizzy. She screamed so much that Stephen grabbed his head and just pushed her out of the apartment. To be honest, he was very worried at first. But he complains to his husband. And then what? But it seemed to pass. Now, watching her in the chair, he realized it was nothing like that. People like her don't forgive. "Stephen, I have an offer you can't refuse." Stephen tensed up. "I'm listening to you. We need to help our office. It is not so far away. Only 300 kilometers from Moscow." Stephen shrank back. "That's it. They're gonna send him to some shithole and forget him. Don't worry, it's only for a few months, and then you can go back to work." Stephen understood perfectly well that he had no choice and waved his head doomfully. But the surprises didn't end there. He stayed in some Pinsk for almost 6 months. He came to the apartment on weekends to sleep it off. He waved it off because where he was forced to stay, hot water outages were the norm. He knew that a young employee was temporarily performing his duties and was sure that he would fail him in his work. But he was wrong. The young employee not only did not screw up his work, but made some adjustments that pleased his boss. Anyway, when Stephen finally returned, he was left with his hands in the air. "Sorry, Stephen, but your successor is doing a much better job than you." "What am I supposed to do? You promised I'd get my job back. But you don't think I came back to my position at the expense of the bank? You can go back to your old position, or you can look for another one, if you're not happy with it." Stephen wrote his resignation letter in the full belief that he'd be ripped off. But of course that didn't happen. He blamed Molly for everything, absolutely everything. He had a thought in his head that he should go and see how she was doing, especially since he had kids there. Stephen liked that thought. He even called his mother. "Oh, Stephen, I don't know if you should come. Molly's doing really well. I don't think you're gonna like it. I mean, she's doing really well. Would you say her diner is making a good profit?" Stephen laughed, but his mother didn't support his mirth. "She's got more than one restaurant now, and I know she's opened one in a neighboring town." Stephen even choked on his saliva. "Mom, she's got a rich patron. But somebody's got to give the fool a clue. What should she do?" Before we could say those words, Stephen quit, but it didn't matter. It was time to visit my daughters, and at the same time to visit my wife. To look her in the eye. She's been on my payroll for years, and look at her. He didn't say anything else, just hung up. "Well, Molly." Stephen suddenly turned around, wondering what he had in his life. Nothing. Not even a job. Not even any of the ladies around him. Of course, when he was on the horse, everybody was interested. And when he fell down, everyone just passes by and pretends they don't know. Molly was so busy that day that she forgot all about John. But he didn't forget about her. He showed up at her restaurant just before lunchtime. "Can I sit here in a corner?" Molly smiled. "Sure, if it's not boring. I'm having a banquet tonight, and I don't have a cook. So I've got to make do." John resolutely took off his jacket. "There's something to change into." Molly looked at him in amazement. "Jesus, I'd forgotten that you're the best chef ever." John modestly conceded. "Well, I guess you're exaggerating, but I can do something." In the evening, tired and both happy, they accepted praise from the visiting guests. One of them came up to them. When everyone was leaving, "I live in another city, but I really liked it here. What if I invite your team to my mansion to prepare everything for an anniversary for about 100 people? As you know, money is not a problem." John and Molly looked at each other. The woman immediately thought that the same immediately could buy a new oven. And a lot of other things. After a couple of weeks, Molly decided to ask John what their future plans were. "Molly, I don't know what to say. Let's talk like adults." Molly blushed for some reason. Jenna immediately hurried off on some important business. "Okay, let's do it." She realized that talking about work wouldn't be the end of it, but she was ready. Every day, Molly realized more and more what a mistake she had made. Once upon a time, John was the complete opposite of Stephen. Nancy and Vanessa literally never left his side when he was home. If they never even tried to approach their father with their problems, they never hesitated to approach John. "Molly, you know I called your mom for a reason. I didn't just come here. When I found out you'd left your husband, and I wanted to tell you right away, so I wouldn't be dragged down by reticence. I realized when I saw you that nothing has gone away at all. I still want to look at you and admire you. You know, maybe it's for the best that there's nothing keeping me there anymore. I wish I could start over from when you and I first met." Molly stood up, walked to the window. "I don't know what to say to you right now." John jumped up. "There's no need to say anything right now. Let things be the way they are. It's not like I'm asking for an answer. It'll come on its own. And about everything else, I'd love to work at your restaurant." Molly approached him a couple months later. "John," he understood, gave her a hug. "And I'll make you and the girls happy. I promise." Stephen continued to look for work. The money was disappearing at a disastrous rate. Now he didn't understand how this Molly managed to run the house on the sums he was giving her. No, he was not a fiddle. At the time, it had seemed to him that he was giving away very substantial sums of money. Now he realized that to live well, he had to get by, and he'd long since gotten used to that. Finally, luck turned to him, but not in his face. He was offered a position as a petty clerk in one of the banks. Do you even know what position I was in? Of course I do. That's why we've made it easy for you. If you don't like it, you can keep looking. Don't get me wrong. There's no such thing as a bank. And it is one thing when a young, inexperienced employee comes and we invest in him what we need. Or a person who is used to working differently will come to us, and it is very difficult to retrain him. There was nothing left for him to do. How to agree? At least he had time to pay the rent. Then he remembered that there was a court-assigned part of the apartment for Molly and the girls, and that Molly could claim her share at any time. Of course, he didn't believe that, but it was too weird the things his mom had told him about his ex-wife. Closer to summer, he finally got ready to go back to his hometown. He didn't know why he was going, whether to visit his mother or to see Molly. Stephen only remembered that he had children there when talking to his colleagues. All along the way, he made plans on how he'd smear her morally. Clearly, for a town of this caliber, any diner is good. Of course, he'd love to rub her face in every flaw. As luck would have it, his path led through the square where the renovated restaurant was located. Money was tight. Stephen wasn't going to pay, though. Would Molly have the conscience to take money from the man who fed and clothed her for so many years? He parked, took a look around. It's a good location. It's close to the Park movie theater. Traffic's good. Molly really did it, didn't she? Stephen's teeth chattered. He clenched his fists. But you'll be sorry you didn't have a quiet life. He pushed the door open with determination. Molly, there's a vegetable delivery, and it's bad. David doesn't want to sign that they're bad. Molly raised her hand. So Molly, be quiet. Molly was the new manager at the restaurant. Young girl, smart, characterful. There was only one flaw in her. As soon as she got nervous, there was a moratorium, so no one could stop her but Molly. Calm down. I'm gonna go talk to David. If Molly had John, he'd be all over him. Well, you know John's out getting new furniture for the banquet hall. I know. I can't wait for him to get here. Molly. On the one hand, it was a shame that so much hope had been pinned on John, as if she meant nothing. And on the other hand, it was a good thing. She'd have to leave the restaurant for a while. This way, she'll be completely at ease. John will handle everything. The woman rose heavily from the table. She's 2 months away from giving birth, and she can barely walk. She felt better when she was carrying the girls. Maybe she was younger, or maybe it was the girls. David, when he saw her, he went down. What man could argue with a pregnant woman like that? He got upset and sighed, signed some paper. David, you promised my restaurant only the freshest. Well, Where am I gonna get fresh? And where do I put the old ones? I thought we were paying you well above market price just to bring in fresh. Yeah, I remember. But I have to try to sell my produce. I'll send my son in an hour. He'll bring something else. Molly smiled. What's he got to do with it? He's always looking out for me. She returned to the office, just wanted to sit down. But then Kelly was back in the office. Molly. Kelly, is there a visitor demanding to see you? At the table, at the premiere. What's going on? Kelly shrugged. I don't know. He seemed happy, but at least it's all eaten. God, what kind of day is today? Molly moved and into the hall. I've had a headache since this morning. At home, the flu was calling the girls. Looks like she wants to be sick too, and she can't be sick. She has a son who won't like it. Molly stroked her stomach, smiled. She remembered how John had reacted to the news that they were having a baby. He'd stood there for a while, just staring at her, and then he'd knelt down and pressed his face against her belly. And I thought I'd never hear those words again. I'm kind of at peace with it. Thank you. She walked down the hall, climbed 3 steps and froze. Stephen was sitting in front of her, smirking. Something was starting to stir in her soul that made her shoulders slump and her head draw back. But Molly quickly came to her senses. There was nothing more to it. She wasn't dependent on him in any way. In fact, Stephen, she's nobody. Stephen, what wind? Yes? I just came to see what gray, uneducated women are up to these days. He saw her belly, smirked at the sherry. That you miscalculated while you were wooing your virtues. Molly felt nausea coming up to her throat. This has nothing to do with you. Why did you call me? Have you changed? The angry snarl backfired. Stephen, I don't have much time. He stood up like he used to. You always had plenty of time for me. Then tell me what you didn't like, will you? You ran away from the truth. But you're the truth. You're stupid. You're ugly. And you're nothing in bed. I don't know what you're offended about. The nausea was becoming unbearable. But Molly smiled in response to her ex-husband's words. Is it just me, or do you sound jealous? Have you seen yourself? Stephen, shirt not fresh on your pants, blisters on your knees. Maybe some people wouldn't notice, but not me. What about your perfect net? You're always perfect, but you're surrounded by suckers, or maybe you're not so cool anymore. She wanted to leave, but Stephen grabbed her arm hard and painfully. And I haven't given you permission to leave yet. Let go, it doesn't hurt. Molly jerked her arm sharply, and Stephen brought his face closer to her. I feel like you owe me a lot. Stephen, let me go. Do you hear me? You are nobody, you have no right. He squinted angrily himself and abruptly let go of Molly. She couldn't keep her footing on the top step and flew screaming downwards. The height was not great, but her position was. Molly fell right at the feet of her husband, who arrived and went looking for her. Molly. The man knelt down. An ambulance quickly. The staff were already running towards him, and John raised a heavy gaze to Stephen. And that's you. Stephen paid the price. He knew this guy from somewhere. He just didn't know where yet. Stephen realized he had to run. He'd better hide now. But he didn't have time. A fist met him on the last step. John, will you answer for this? Are you gonna answer for everything? He ran out of the restaurant, but no one chased him. Molly was falling into darkness, and then out of it came an unbearable stomachache. So much I wanted to scream. Be patient, honey, just a little bit patient. Jenna took the girls. Christopher said he'd give his ex-brother-in-law a proper welcome. He said he had the strength to throw him down the stairs. Molly smiled weakly. Daddy can. Pierced through her whole body again. Be patient, darling. We're here now. Someone was talking over her. Then they were taking her somewhere. She felt a prick in her arm, and it felt very light. Molly closed her eyes. John couldn't find his place. He paced up and down the hallway until an orderly yelled at him. You're walking like a pendulum, but it doesn't make you feel any better. And you won't let me mop the floors. He looked at the old woman confused. I'm sorry, and sat down. She approached him, wife. Oh, don't you worry. We have very good doctors. Thank you. The phone rang in my pocket. Yes, it was Jenna and John. How's it going? How's Molly? The woman was crying. I don't know anything yet. She's in surgery. John, that creep Stephen. He set a pie on fire. How? Just like that. They caught him, but they couldn't save the pie. No one got hurt. No, it was nothing. John, why don't you call me when you know something? Okay. He just disconnected the call when the doctor came out of the door. John stood up and stared at him in silence. Why are you staring at me like that? You'd better watch your wife. About 15 minutes later. And it's unlikely the kid would have been saved by now. You're a premature baby, of course, but a strong one will gain weight quickly. So do not worry. John noisily exhaled. Molly and Molly, your mom. True, you will not be able to have children. We have 3. Well, that's good. John suddenly stepped toward the doctor. Thank you, hugged him, then grabbed his phone. Jenna, the boy's fine. Molly too. We're gonna build a new one. And way cooler than the first one. Wendy opened her eyes and immediately remembered what had happened. She put her hand to her stomach and froze in horror. Immediately her husband's smiling face appeared above her. Don't worry, everything is fine. Our son is alive and will soon be perfectly healthy. Anchor, Wendy, you know. He took her hand in his. When I realized I could have lost you, I thought about how I don't need anything here without you. What's my point? I love you so much that I didn't even realize it myself. Molly smiled, and I love you very much. They didn't get discharged until a month later. Molly was a little nervous. John had only been around for a few minutes lately, and then he'd run off. She couldn't figure out what was wrong. This morning she saw on the news that her pie shop had burned down a month ago. She was furious. Why hadn't he said anything? But she was building him houses. They were driving down some strange road. Why are we driving here? I want to show you something. Isn't that leftover pie? John turned to her. How long have you known? This morning. I just didn't want to worry you. The car had stopped. They were standing in the square just past Chelsea's, her restaurant, and next to them a small building with a nice sign, pastry shop at Sophia's. As you realize, on the other side of town, the pastry shop at Nancy's. Molly felt tears forming in her eyes. John, you and me. John, I remember her. And converted. Molly snuggled into his chest. Well, why was I such a fool and didn't marry you right away? Well, we all make mistakes in life. But if we take our time, our mistake will be our last. Jenna will nail us because she almost cooked all night, and the girls helped her. Molly laughed. She looked at her son, who was sleeping sweetly. Yes, we have to go. Our grandmother is strict. A week after we returned, the candy stores opened. A lot of people had gathered. Molly was worried. John, on the other hand, was completely calm. He now knew that nothing would ever destroy the happiness of their big and strong family. And on top of all this, he had brought 2 pastry chefs from the capital. He had forgotten to tell the line about it, and now he was afraid to. Just a few days ago, there was a trial. Stephen confusedly said that his ex-wife had brought him to such a state. He explained that she had taken away his luck, and in fact, she should be tried. And Molly suddenly stood up. I want to drop the lawsuit. Let him live free. John only then realized how much Molly had punished Stephen. At first, he didn't understand such an impulse, and when Stephen stopped next to them and said, it turns out you didn't do the honest rednecks, so I hate your debt now. John stood up, and Stephen quickly headed for the door. John looked at Molly. She finally smiled. What's the matter? Let him suffer a little. It won't last long anyway. John laughed. Yes, you are a dangerous woman. Molly replied with a smile. I'm just the most loved and loving.